The antiseptic smell hit me first, sharp, chemical, burning the inside of my nose. Then came the beeping, steady, mechanical, heartless. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they'd been glued shut. Every breath scraped my throat raw. The car, the crash, the guardrail spinning toward us. I remembered the impact. Metal crunching, glass exploding, my head slamming against something hard, then darkness. But now I could hear voices, close, too close. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. How long until we know? That was Owen, my son. His voice tight, controlled. The doctor said 24 to 48 hours. Sienna, my daughter-in-law. She sounded calm. Too calm for someone whose mother-in-law just nearly died. I tried to move my fingers. Nothing. Tried to open my mouth. Nothing. Panic clawed at my chest, but my body wouldn't respond. Was I paralyzed? Brain damaged? If she doesn't survive, the life insurance will get us everything. The words came from Owen. Quiet, matter of fact. Like he was discussing the weather. My heart monitor beeped faster. I heard it. They must have heard it too. Finally, Sienna whispered. I could hear the smile in her voice. No more begging, no more playing nice. The room tilted. Not physically, I couldn't feel my body, but everything inside me lurched sideways. My son, my only child. The boy I'd raised alone after his father died. The man I'd given everything to. Keep your voice down, Owen hissed. The nurse could come back. Relax. She's unconscious. Even if she wakes up, she probably won't remember anything from today. Footsteps, getting closer to my bed. The temperature in the room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. I focused every ounce of energy on staying still, on keeping my breathing even despite the screaming in my head. Ma'am? A new voice. Male, professional. I'm checking your mother's pulse. Is she going to be okay? Owen's voice cracked perfectly, Oscar-worthy. Fingers pressed against my wrist. Warm. Steady, the paramedic from the ambulance probably. I remembered his face hovering over me at the crash site. Remembered his calm instructions to stay still. Her vitals are stronger than expected. A pause. Ma'am, if you can hear me, try to squeeze my hand. I squeezed. Hard. She's responsive. The paramedic's voice sharpened. She's not unconscious. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then Owen. That's wonderful. Mom, can you hear us? We're here. We love you. The paramedic's grip on my wrist tightened slightly. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, harder. She's not unconscious, and she can hear every word you're saying. The air left the room. I heard Sienna's sharp intake of breath. Owen's strangled, "What?" Every word. The paramedic, his badge said, Morris, I'd seen it in the ambulance, spoke slowly, deliberately. Mrs. Talbot has been conscious this entire time. She heard your conversation about life insurance. We didn't mean, Sienna stammered. Save it. Morris released my wrist gently, carefully, like I was made of glass. I'm calling hospital security, and Detective Patterson. He handles these kinds of cases. My eyes fluttered open. The fluorescent lights burned. Everything was blurry, shapes and shadows in too bright white. I blinked until Owen's face came into focus. He looked gray, pale, terrified. Mom, he breathed. Mom, I can explain. Step back from the patient. Morris positioned himself between Owen and my bed. His hand rested on something at his belt. Pepper spray, maybe, or a radio. The door burst open. A woman in scrubs, nurse, late 20s, Latina. Her name tag read Rodriguez. Rushed in with 2 security guards behind her. Mr. Morris radioed about a situation, one guard said. I tried to speak. My throat was sandpaper. Water, I croaked. Rodriguez was at my side instantly, tilting a cup to my lips. The water was lukewarm, plastic tasting, but I'd never been more grateful for anything in my life. Take your time, Mrs. Talbot, she murmured. Her hand rested on my shoulder, steady, grounding. I looked past her at Owen, at Sienna standing frozen by the window, her phone clutched in her hand. How much? My voice came out stronger than I expected. How much life insurance? Owen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Mom, please, you don't understand. 300,000, Sienna said flatly. She'd recovered faster than Owen, her face settling into hard lines. You took out the policy 2 years ago when you sold the bookstore. You made Owen the beneficiary. The bookstore. My mother's bookstore. 40 years of her life, then mine. I'd sold it to pay off Owen's gambling debts. $67,000 he'd lost at the casino in Kansas City. He'd sobbed in my kitchen, swore he'd get help, promised he'd pay me back. That was 3 years ago. I'd never seen a penny. I gave you everything. The words came out quiet, flat. I watched Owen flinch. The bookstore money, Bryce's college fund when you said the business was failing, the $12,000 for Sienna's rehab. That wasn't rehab, Sienna cut in. Her voice had an edge now, defensive. That was a wellness retreat. I needed it for my mental health. You needed it for Instagram photos. The words came from the doorway. We all turned. A teenage boy stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder. His face older than 16 had any right to be. Bryce, my grandson, Owen and Sienna's son, Grandma. He crossed the room in 3 strides, ignoring his parents completely. His hand found mine, squeezed carefully. I heard what happened. Are you okay? His eyes were wet. Actually wet. Real tears, not the performance his father had put on. Bryce, go wait outside, Owen said sharply. No. Bryce didn't even look at him. I'm staying with Grandma. This is a family matter. She is family. You two? Bryce's voice cracked. I don't know what you are anymore. Rodriguez stepped forward. I think everyone except Mrs. Talbot and her grandson need to leave. Now. We have a right to be here, Sienna protested. We're her family. You're under investigation, Morris said quietly. Detective Patterson is on his way. You'll want to call a lawyer. Owen's face crumpled. For a second, just a second, I saw my little boy again. 7 years old, crying because he'd fallen off his bike. But then his jaw tightened and the stranger was back. Let's go, he muttered to Sienna. They left without another word. The door clicked shut behind them and the room exhaled. I looked at Bryce, really looked at him. When had he gotten so tall? When had his face thinned out, losing the baby roundness? How long have you known? I asked quietly. He bit his lip. About them wanting you dead? I didn't. But about them using you? He glanced at the door. Grandma, they've been lying about everything. Dad doesn't have a failing business. He sold it 6 months ago. For $200,000. The room spun again. They bought a condo in Florida. They're planning to move after. He stopped. Swallowed hard. They posted pictures on Facebook. Private account. But I saw them. Dad was tagged at some beach bar with the caption, Early retirement. Here we come. $224,000. That's what I'd calculated once. Late at night, unable to sleep. 8 years of emergencies and investments and just this one last time, Mom. Gone. And they'd been planning their escape all along. Mrs. Talbot? Rodriguez touched my arm gently. How are you feeling? Any pain? Everything hurt. My ribs, my head, my chest. But the worst pain wasn't physical. I'm fine, I lied. Bryce squeezed my hand again. Grandma, I'm not going with them to Florida. I'll turn 18 in 2 years. I can stay here with you until then. I'll get a job, Shh, I squeezed back. We'll figure it out. But even as I said it, I was thinking, calculating, planning. They'd wanted me dead. My own son had stood over my hospital bed and discussed my life insurance like I was already a corpse. Well, I wasn't dead. Not even close. And now they'd given me something I hadn't had in years. Absolute clarity about who they really were. Morris had left the room but returned now with a man in a cheap suit, Detective Patterson presumably. He had tired eyes and gray stubble and the patient look of someone who'd seen every horrible thing humans could do to each other. Mrs. Talbot, he said quietly. I need to ask you some questions about the accident. I nodded slowly. The brakes failed. We were coming down the hill on Route 32, and Owen was driving, and I told him to slow down, but nothing happened when he pressed the pedal. Patterson pulled out a notebook. "You're sure the brakes failed?" "It wasn't just slick roads. I'm sure." Owen kept pumping the pedal. Nothing. We went straight through the guardrail. Were there any mechanical issues with the car before today? I thought back. Tried to remember. Owen borrowed my car last week. Said his was in the shop. When he brought it back, he said he'd gotten the oil changed for me. Patterson and Morris exchanged a look. "We'll need to examine the vehicle," Patterson said. "Mrs. Talbot, I want you to know what happened in this room today, what Mr. Morris overheard. We're taking it very seriously. They were going to kill me." The words came out steady, certain. Weren't they? Patterson didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was gentle. "Let's focus on getting you healthy first. Then we'll get to the truth." But I already knew the truth. I could see it in Bryce's frightened eyes, in the careful way Rodriguez kept checking my monitors, in the way Morris stood guard at the door like he expected Owen to come back. My son had tried to murder me. And somewhere in this hospital, he and Sienna were probably calling lawyers, crafting stories, preparing their defense. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated me. 68 years old, broken ribs, possible concussion, betrayed by my own blood, and they thought I'd just die quietly. They were wrong. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days. Observation, they called it. Cracked ribs, mild concussion, severe bruising. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that insurance would cover the stay. Insurance. The word tasted like metal in my mouth now. Bryce slept in the chair beside my bed every night. Owen and Sienna didn't come back after that first day, but I knew they were out there, waiting, planning. Detective Patterson had questioned them separately. I heard that from Rodriguez, who'd become my unofficial guardian angel. "They lawyered up immediately," she told me on the second morning, adjusting my IV with practiced efficiency. The plastic tubing was cold against my arm, both of them. Same attorney, which Detective Patterson says is interesting. Why interesting? I shifted in the bed. Every movement sent sharp pains through my ribcage because innocent people usually don't coordinate their legal strategy within an hour of an accident. Rodriguez checked the monitor, her fingers quick and competent. "I've worked ER for 6 years, Mrs. Talbot. I've seen families fall apart over medical crises. But I've never seen anyone lawyer up that fast unless they had something to hide." The morning light coming through the window was thin, watery. March in Cedar Rapids meant gray skies and stubborn cold. I could see my breath sometimes when they opened the door to the hallway. "Has Detective Patterson said anything about the car?" I asked. "He wants to talk to you today. He's waiting until your friend arrives." "Friend?" As if on cue, the door swung open. A woman I hadn't seen in 8 months walked in carrying a thermos and a paper bag that smelled like real coffee and cinnamon rolls. Margot Klein, my former colleague from Lincoln Elementary. We'd taught side by side for 23 years before we both retired. "Diane?" Her voice cracked. She set everything down on the rolling table and pulled me into a careful hug. "Jesus Christ, when Bryce called me?" "I'm okay," I whispered into her shoulder. She smelled like vanilla perfume and the coconut shampoo she'd used for decades. Familiar. Safe. She pulled back, studying my face. Margot had sharp eyes behind her thick framed glasses, the kind of eyes that caught every student passing notes, every parent lying about homework. "Bryce told me what happened, what they said." Her jaw tightened. "I never liked that boy of yours. Sorry, but I didn't. Always had a slippery quality to him." "You're not wrong." I took the coffee she offered. Real coffee, not the hospital swill. The first sip was heaven. Hot, strong, exactly how I liked it. "Did Bryce tell you everything? About Owen and Sienna planning to cash in your life insurance?" "Yes." "About them possibly sabotaging your brakes?" "Yes." She pulled a chair close, lowering her voice. "About the Florida condo and the $200,000 from his business sale?" "Yes." Bryce appeared in the doorway, looking guilty. "I had to tell someone, Grandma. Someone you trust. You did the right thing." I gestured him closer. Margot's basically been my best friend since 1997. If anyone can help us figure this out, she can. Margot reached into her enormous purse, the same leather bag she'd carried for years, held together with duct tape and determination, and pulled out a folder. I did some digging, nothing illegal, just public records and social media. She spread papers across my lap, printouts from Facebook, Instagram, property records from Florida, business filings. Owen's company, Talbot Digital Solutions, was sold 6 months ago to a firm in Des Moines. Sale price, $197,000, according to the state business registry. She tapped one document. He filed the paperwork in November. I'd given him $15,000 in November. He'd said the business was struggling, that he needed to make payroll or he'd lose his employees. There are no employees, Margot continued, reading my face. It was a one-man operation, website design, consulting. He was the only name on the LLC. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. The Florida condo was purchased in January. Cash sale. Another document. Address is in Fort Myers, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 8th floor, ocean view. Purchase price, $230,000. They spent more than they got from the business sale, Bryce said quietly. Exactly. Margot pulled out more printouts, which brings us to these Instagram posts. Sienna's account, marked private but visible to Bryce since he was her son. Photos of a condo interior, sleek, modern, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking turquoise water. Captions like, "New chapter coming soon," and "Goodbye Iowa winters forever." The most recent post was from 2 weeks ago, Sienna in a white sundress, champagne glass raised, standing on a balcony. The caption read, "Celebrating early retirement with my love. Dreams do come true when you're patient. Blessed, new beginnings. Patient. She'd been patient all right. Patient while bleeding me dry." "There's more," Margot said, her voice dropping even lower. "I have a friend who works at Cedar Rapids State Bank." She couldn't give me specific information, but she could confirm that someone made inquiries about your accounts 3 weeks ago. Inquiries? Asking about balances, beneficiaries, access. Your son was listed as having power of attorney for medical decisions, but he was asking about financial access. The room felt colder. I never gave him financial power of attorney. I know. That's what raised red flags. My friend made notes in your file about the inquiry, just as a precaution. Detective Patterson chose that moment to knock and enter. He looked even more tired than before, his suit rumpled, coffee stain on his collar. "Mrs. Talbot, Ms. Klein." He nodded at Margot, then noticed the papers spread across my bed. "Doing my job for me?" "Just gathering information to help my friend," Margot said coolly. Patterson almost smiled. "I need to talk to Mrs. Talbot about the vehicle inspection. Can everyone else step outside for a few minutes?" Bryce and Margot left reluctantly. Rodriguez stayed, standing by the monitors like she'd been assigned to guard me. Maybe she had been. Patterson pulled out his notebook, flipped through several pages. "Mrs. Talbot, we examined your vehicle yesterday. The brake lines were cut." I'd expected it, known it really, but hearing it out loud still hit like a fist to the stomach. "Cut," I repeated. "Not worn through, not damaged in the accident. Cut, deliberately, cleanly. Someone who knew what they were doing used bolt cutters or heavy shears. The lines were severed maybe 70% through, enough that they'd hold for a few miles of normal driving, but they'd fail completely under sustained pressure, like coming down a steep hill. Route 32. Owen had insisted on taking Route 32, even though the highway was faster. He'd said something about wanting to show me the fall colors, which had made no sense in March. "Owen was driving," I said slowly. "He could have died too." "Could have, but he was wearing his seatbelt. You weren't." My blood went cold. "I was wearing my seatbelt. I always wear my seatbelt. I'm religious about it." In Patterson's expression didn't change. "Your son told responding officers at the scene that you refused to buckle up, said you'd been acting confused all morning, that he was worried about your cognitive state." "That's a lie." My voice came out sharp, angry. "I buckled my seatbelt the second I got in the car. I remember checking it twice because the buckle was stiff. The buckle was tampered with, Patterson said quietly. The release mechanism was jammed with superglue. It would click into place, appear secured, but release with minimal pressure. During the accident, your belt came free. The fluorescent lights above hummed. Someone's IV pump beeped down the hall. The smell of disinfectant seemed stronger suddenly, making my eyes water. He tried to kill me. The words came out flat, factual. My son tried to kill me. We're building a case for attempted murder, but Mrs. Talbot, I need you to understand. This is complicated. Owen has an attorney claiming he's a victim too, that someone else must have tampered with the vehicle. He's saying he had no idea about the brakes, that he could have died, but he was wearing a working seatbelt, and I wasn't. Exactly. But proving he knew about the glue in your buckle? That's harder. His lawyer is already preparing an alternate theory, that you glued your own buckle because you were mentally unstable, that this is some kind of insurance scam you planned. That's insane. That's reasonable doubt. Patterson closed his notebook, which is why I need everything you have. Financial records, text messages, emails, witnesses who can testify about your relationship with Owen and Sienna. Anything that establishes motive. Rodriguez cleared her throat. Detective, Mrs. Talbot has had a traumatic few days. Maybe this can wait. It's fine. I cut her off. Let me call Margot back in. She's already been documenting everything. What followed was 2 hours of methodical evidence gathering. Margot's papers, my own bank records going back 8 years, which I requested from the bank via phone, Bryce's testimony about the Facebook posts, the overheard arguments, the casual cruelty he'd witnessed. Patterson took notes, made copies, bagged documents. When he finally left, the sun was setting, painting the room orange and gold. We have enough for attempted murder charges, he said at the door. I'm bringing them in for questioning tomorrow. Fair warning, they're going to post bail immediately. Owen's lawyer is aggressive. How much bail? Bryce asked. For attempted murder? Probably $250,000 each. Bryce paled. They can afford that. The condo, the business money. Let them spend it. Margot's voice was hard. Every dollar they waste on lawyers and bail is one less dollar they get to enjoy in Florida. After Patterson left, the three of us sat in silence. Rodriguez brought dinner trays, rubbery chicken, instant mashed potatoes, Jell-O that tasted like colored water. I picked at it, not hungry. Grandma? Bryce's voice was small. What happens to me if Dad goes to prison? I reached for his hand. You stay with me. I'll fight for custody if I have to, but you're not going anywhere. They won't try to— He couldn't finish the sentence. Hurt you? No. You're not worth $300,000 to them. I am. The words came out harsher than I intended. Sorry, that was true, Margot finished. That was true. Diane, these people are predators. They've been circling you for years, waiting for the right moment. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mom, please call me. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. I love you. Owen! I showed it to Margot. She snorted. Don't respond. That's evidence. Screenshot it and send it to Patterson. I did. Then I blocked the number. Another text came through from Sienna's phone this time. You're making a mistake. Owen would never hurt you. Think about Bryce. Do you really want to put him through a trial? She's using Bryce as leverage, Margot said, reading over my shoulder. Classic manipulation. I blocked that number too. Then I closed my eyes and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Rage, grief, betrayal. My son, my only child, the baby I'd nursed through colic and chicken pox and teenage heartbreak, had glued my seatbelt buckle and cut my brake lines and planned my funeral. Mrs. Talbot? Rodriguez touched my shoulder gently. Your heart rate is elevated. You need to rest. I need to think. You can think tomorrow. Right now, you need to heal. But even as I let her give me something for the pain, even as sleep pulled me under, my mind was working, calculating, planning. Owen had made one critical mistake. He'd let me survive. They released me on the 4th day. Margot drove me home in her ancient Subaru that smelled like dog hair and peppermint. Bryce sat in the back with my discharge papers and 3 prescription bottles rattling in a pharmacy bag. My house looked smaller than I remembered. The gray ranch style I'd lived in for 32 years suddenly felt like a stranger's home. The driveway had a crack I'd never noticed. The mailbox tilted at an odd angle. "Someone's been here," Bryce said, his voice tight. He was right. The spare key I kept under the ceramic frog by the front door was sitting on top of the frog instead of beneath it. Not hidden, just placed there, obvious and careless. Margot grabbed my arm. "We should call Detective Patterson." "Wait." I limped up the 3 porch steps, each one sending pain through my ribs. The front door was locked, but when I turned my key, something felt wrong. The deadbolt was already open, only the handle lock engaged. Inside, the house smelled stale. Windows closed, heat turned down to 60. March cold had seeped into everything. I could see my breath, but that wasn't what made my stomach drop. My living room had been searched, not ransacked. Nothing broken or obviously stolen, but moved. The couch cushions were slightly askew. The photo albums on the bookshelf were out of order. The drawer in my writing desk stood open half an inch. "They were looking for something," Margot said quietly. I walked through the house like I was touring a crime scene. Kitchen, cabinet doors not quite closed. Bedroom, dresser drawers disturbed. My jewelry box opened. The cheap costume jewelry was still there, but the envelope I'd hidden underneath, the one with my original birth certificate, my marriage license, my mother's will, was gone. "Grandma, look." Bryce stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom I used as an office. My filing cabinet drawer hung open. Manila folders spilled across the floor. Financial records, tax returns going back 7 years, bank statements, investment account summaries, all the proof of every dollar I'd given Owen. Gone. I sank into my desk chair. The leather was cold, cracked in places. The afternoon light coming through the window was weak, gray, filtering through clouds that threatened snow. "They took everything," I whispered. Margot was already on her phone with Patterson. I heard her voice in the background, sharp and angry, but the words didn't register. I was staring at the empty filing cabinet, thinking about my mother, Eleanor Sawyer. She'd bought the bookstore in 1952 with money saved from 15 years of teaching, built it into the most beloved independent bookstore in Cedar Rapids. When she died 8 years ago at 93, she'd left it to me with one instruction written in her shaky handwriting on a note card. "Don't sell it unless you absolutely have to. It's your legacy, sweetheart." I'd sold it 3 years later. For Owen. For his gambling debts. For his promises to change. My mother would have been ashamed of me. The thought hit like a physical blow. I bent forward, forehead against the desk, and let myself cry for the first time since the accident. Ugly crying, the kind that shakes your whole body and makes your throat raw. Margot found me like that, knelt beside the chair, rubbed my back the way she'd done 20 years ago when my husband died. "It's not your fault," she murmured. "None of this is your fault." But it felt like it was. I'd enabled Owen, made excuses, ignored the red flags that had been waving since he was a teenager. "Mrs. Talbot?" Detective Patterson stood in the office doorway, another officer behind him. "We need to document everything that's been disturbed." The next 2 hours were a blur of photographs and statements. What was missing? When I'd last been home, who had access? The spare key, which I'd foolishly told Owen about years ago. "We'll dust for prints, but I'm guessing they wore gloves," Patterson said. "This was deliberate. They wanted your financial records, probably planning to claim you gave them money willingly, and without your documentation, it's harder to prove otherwise." "I have bank statements," I said. "Digital records. They can't erase those." "No, but they can claim those were gifts, that you were helping family. Without your paper trail of loans, IOUs, promises to repay, it becomes," he said, she said. I thought of the notebook I'd kept for 5 years. Every dollar recorded, every promise noted. Owen's signature on 3 different loan agreements. All of it in that filing cabinet. All of it gone. "There's something else," Patterson said carefully. "We have security footage from your bank. 3 weeks ago, Owen came in with a woman who wasn't Sienna. Older woman, late 60s. She was with him when he made inquiries about your accounts. He showed me a still image on his phone. Grainy, taken from above, but unmistakable. My sister Ruth." The room tilted. I grabbed the desk edge for support. "You know her," Patterson said. "Not a question." My sister, Ruth Campbell. She lives in Iowa City. My voice sounded hollow. We haven't spoken in 8 months. Not since last July. Last July, my 71st birthday. Ruth had come for dinner, brought a grocery store cake, stayed for an hour. As she was leaving, she'd asked to borrow $5,000. Some problem with her roof, she'd said. She'd pay me back within the month. I'd said no. For the first time in our relationship, I'd said no. I was exhausted from bailing out Owen. Exhausted from being an ATM for everyone in my family. I told her I couldn't afford it. She'd called me selfish, said I was hoarding money I didn't need, that family was supposed to help family. She'd left angry, tires squealing as she pulled out of my driveway. I hadn't heard from her since. She's involved in this, Margot said flatly. She's helping them. Patterson nodded slowly. I need to bring her in for questioning. Mrs. Talbot, is there any reason your sister would want to hurt you? I thought about our childhood. Ruth, 3 years older, always resentful that our mother favored me. The bookstore was supposed to go to both of us, but Mom had left it to me alone. Ruth got the house in Iowa City and $20,000. I got the business worth $300,000. Ruth had contested the will, hired a lawyer, dragged me through probate court for 18 months, finally dropped it when her lawyer told her she had no case, but she'd never forgiven me. She's always been jealous, I said quietly, of everything Mom gave me, of the bookstore, of my marriage, my son. When her husband left her 15 years ago, she blamed me, said I'd had it too easy, that I didn't understand real struggle. And when you refused to lend her money, she said I'd regret it. I thought she meant she'd cut me off. I didn't think I couldn't finish the sentence. Bryce had been silent through all of this, sitting on the floor against the wall, hugging his knees. Now he spoke up, his voice careful. Grandma, remember Thanksgiving? When Dad said he couldn't host because his house was being fumigated. I nodded. We'd gone to a restaurant instead. Expensive, uncomfortable, everyone stiff and formal. He lied. I drove past his house that day. There was no fumigation. But Aunt Ruth's car was in his driveway, and when I texted him about it, he said I was confused, that it must have been a different house. Patterson and I exchanged glances. When was this? November 23rd? I remember because it was weird. Why would Aunt Ruth be at Dad's house on Thanksgiving if we weren't all together? Patterson made notes. Mrs. Talbot, I need you to think carefully. Is there anything else your sister might have access to? Any other information she could use? My safe deposit box. The key was on my keyring, but Ruth knew which bank, which branch. Years ago, when Mom died, we'd sorted through her affairs together. Ruth had helped me set up the box for important documents. She knows about my safe deposit box, I said slowly. But she doesn't have a key. She can't access it. Has anyone been to your box recently? I tried to remember. Not since last summer. June, maybe. I added my updated will. Patterson's expression sharpened. Your will. Who's the beneficiary? Owen. Everything goes to Owen, then to Bryce if Owen dies first. And your sister knows this? Everyone knows this. It's not a secret. Mrs. Talbot, I need to ask you to come to the bank with me tomorrow. First thing. I want to check your box. Make sure nothing's been tampered with. That night, Margot insisted I stay at her house. You're not sleeping alone in that violated space, she said firmly. Bryce agreed. We packed bags, locked up, left lights on to make the house look occupied. Margot's house smelled like cinnamon and old books. She set me up in her guest room, the same room I'd stayed in when my husband died, when I couldn't face my empty house. The bed was soft, the quilts heavy. A nightlight glowed in the corner, shaped like a reading cat, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ruth, about how I'd taught her to braid her hair when we were kids, how she'd held my hand at Mom's funeral, how she'd been the first person I'd called when Owen was born. We'd been close once, before jealousy poisoned everything, before money became more important than blood. Around midnight, Bryce knocked softly on my door. Grandma, you awake? Come in, sweetheart. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking small despite being nearly 6 feet tall. I heard Aunt Ruth on the phone with Dad once, back in December. I was at their house picking up some stuff I'd left there, and I heard her voice from the garage. She was saying something about the old lady won't live forever, and being patient pays off. My chest tightened. Did you tell anyone? No, I thought they were talking about someone else. Maybe one of Dad's clients or something. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have said something. I pulled him into a careful hug, mindful of my ribs. You're not responsible for their choices. None of this is your fault. But inside, I was calculating. Ruth had been planning this with Owen for months, maybe longer. The two of them, working together to isolate me, discredit me, bleed me dry, and finally kill me. My sister and my son, the two people who were supposed to love me most in the world. The bedroom door creaked open wider. Margot stood there with 3 mugs of chamomile tea on a tray. Couldn't sleep either. Figured we could all use something warm. We sat in that guest room until 3 in the morning, drinking tea that got cold, talking through every memory, every warning sign I'd missed. Margot took notes in her teacher's planning book. Dates, names, amounts. Building a case. Tomorrow we go to the bank, she said finally. We see what they've done to your box, and then we start fighting back. They're going to come after me harder, I said. If Ruth's involved, if they're working together, they're not going to just accept charges and go quietly. Good. Margot's eyes were hard behind her glasses. Let them come. This time, you're not alone. Bryce squeezed my hand. And this time, you're not their victim. You're their nightmare. He meant it as encouragement, but the words settled over me like a promise. They'd wanted me dead and gone, my money in their pockets, my voice silenced forever. Instead, I was alive, angry, and ready to make sure they regretted every single lie. The bank opened at 9. We were there at 8:45, standing in the parking lot as frost melted off car windshields. Detective Patterson arrived with another officer, a younger woman named Chen who carried a metal evidence kit. Whatever we find today, Patterson said, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. We document everything. Photos, video, witnesses. If they've tampered with anything in that box, I want an airtight case. The bank manager, a nervous man in his 50s named Howard, met us at the door. He kept glancing at Patterson's badge like it might burn him. Mrs. Talbot, I want you to know, we take the security of our safe deposit boxes extremely seriously, he said, fumbling with his keys. His hands shook slightly. There's no way anyone could have accessed yours without proper authorization. Let's find out, I said quietly. The vault was in the basement, down carpeted stairs that muffled our footsteps. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, humming like angry insects. The air smelled like metal and old paper and something else. Fear, maybe. Or just my imagination. Howard used his master key first, then handed me mine. The box slid out with a metallic scrape that made my teeth hurt. It was empty. Not completely empty. There was a single piece of paper inside, folded once. My hands trembled as I reached for it, but Patterson stopped me. Don't touch it yet. Chen, photographs first. Officer Chen documented everything. The empty box, the paper, the way my hands hovered over it, frozen. Then Patterson used gloved hands to unfold the note. It was my will, the original, but it had been altered. Someone had used white correction fluid to change the beneficiary. Where it had said Owen Michael Talbot, it now said Owen Michael Talbot and Ruth Ann Campbell in equal shares. Jesus Christ, Margot whispered behind me. Patterson's jaw tightened. When was the last time you physically saw this document, Mrs. Talbot? Last June. I came to check on it after my birthday. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Everything was here then. The will, my mother's jewelry, the deed to my house, bonds worth about $30,000. All gone, Chen said, photographing the altered will from multiple angles. Except this. They wanted you to find this. Why? Bryce asked. Why leave evidence? Because they were planning to have it discovered after Mrs. Talbot died, Patterson said grimly. A tragic accident. Grieving family searches her safe deposit box and finds her real will, the one that splits everything between her son and sister. By the time anyone questioned it, Mrs. Talbot would be dead and unable to dispute it. Howard looked like he might be sick. But we have protocols, access logs, security cameras. Show me, Patterson ordered. Upstairs, in Howard's office that smelled of coffee and stress sweat, we watched security footage from the past 3 months, fast-forwarding through countless customers until Howard paused on a date, February 18th, 3 weeks before the accident. Ruth entered the bank at 10:47 a.m., alone. She approached the safe deposit area, spoke to a teller I didn't recognize. Young girl, maybe 22, blonde ponytail. "That's Madison," Howard said. "She's only been with us for 6 months. She was let go 2 weeks ago." "Let go why?" Patterson asked sharply. "Irregularities in her handling of customer accounts. Small things. Putting through transactions without proper verification. We gave her a warning, but then we found she'd been accepting cash tips from customers for expedited service." On the screen, Madison led Ruth to the vault. They disappeared from camera view for 12 minutes. When Ruth emerged, she was carrying a large purse that looked heavier than when she'd entered. "Did Madison have access to master keys?" Patterson asked. Howard's face went gray. "Trainee keys. Yes. They're not supposed to use them without supervision, but she let Ruth Campbell into Mrs. Talbot's safe deposit box in exchange for money." Patterson's voice was ice. "I need Madison's employment records. Address, phone number, everything. Now." While Howard scrambled to print documents, I stared at the frozen image of my sister on the screen. She was smiling, actually smiling, like she'd just won something. "Grandma," Bryce said quietly, pulling out his phone. "There's something I need to show you. I should have shown you before, but I was scared." He opened an app I didn't recognize, voice recording software. "I've been recording them," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Mom and Dad, since January. I knew something was wrong. The way they talked when they thought I wasn't listening. The phone calls they'd take in the garage. So I downloaded this app and I left my phone recording in my backpack, in the kitchen, wherever they were." He pressed play. Static first, background noise, then Sienna's voice, sharp and impatient. "Can't wait forever, Owen. Your mom could live another 20 years. My sister did that ancestry DNA thing and found out their family has longevity genes or whatever. We need to move faster." Owen's response was muffled, but I caught, "Already talked to Ruth about it. She's on board. Says she'll split it 50-50 with us after." "After what?" Sienna's voice dripped with false innocence. "After Mom's gone." "Jesus, Sienna, don't make me say it out loud. You're too squeamish. Ruth isn't. She said she'd handle the mechanical stuff. All you have to do is drive carefully and make sure you're wearing your seatbelt." Silence. Then Owen. "What about Bryce? What about him? He'll be at school. He won't know anything until after. We'll play devastated parents. Everyone will feel sorry for us." The recording continued. 5 minutes of them planning my death like they were planning a vacation, discussing the brake lines, the seatbelt glue, the route down Route 32 that had steep hills and dangerous curves. Ruth had done the actual sabotage. Owen had just driven the car. When the recording ended, the office was silent except for the wheeze of Howard's breathing and the hum of the computer. "How many recordings do you have?" Patterson asked Bryce, his voice careful. 17. Some are just boring stuff, but 6 of them are like this. Planning. Talking about money. Ruth calling Grandma names. Bryce's voice cracked. "I'm sorry I didn't tell anyone sooner. I was afraid they'd find out and—" "You did exactly right," Patterson said firmly. "You gathered evidence safely. That took courage." He looked at me. "Mrs. Talbot, with these recordings, we have premeditation, conspiracy. We have Ruth admitting to the sabotage. This is attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, theft. I can arrest all 3 of them today." "Do it," I said. The words came out hard, final. "Arrest them." Patterson made phone calls, coordinated with other officers. Within an hour, we were back in Margot's living room. It had become our unofficial command center, watching the news on her ancient TV. Breaking story this morning. 3 Cedar Rapids residents have been arrested in connection with an alleged murder-for-hire plot targeting a family member. Owen Talbot, his wife Sienna Talbot, and Owen's aunt Ruth Campbell were taken into custody this morning and charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. They showed Owen being led out of his house in handcuffs. He looked smaller on TV, ordinary, not like someone who'd tried to kill his own mother. Sienna screamed at the cameras, her face twisted with rage. "This is insane! We didn't do anything! She's lying! That old woman is lying!" Ruth said nothing, just stared straight ahead as they put her in the police car, her expression blank and cold. "Bail hearing is set for tomorrow," Patterson told us by phone. "The DA is arguing for no bail given the severity of the charges and flight risk. They have a condo in Florida, money to run, but their lawyer will push hard for bail." "How much?" Margot asked. $500,000 each, maybe more. After Patterson hung up, we sat in stunned silence. Bryce curled up next to me on the couch, his head on my shoulder like he used to do when he was small. "Is it really over?" he asked. "The arrests are done. The trial will take months." I stroked his hair, feeling how much he'd grown. "But yes, sweetheart, the worst is over." That night, Margot made spaghetti, her grandmother's recipe, the sauce simmering for hours until the whole house smelled like basil and garlic and safety. We ate at her kitchen table, the three of us, and for the first time in weeks, food actually tasted like food. "I called a locksmith," Margot said, twirling pasta on her fork. "He's changing all your locks tomorrow. And I called a security company. You're getting cameras, motion sensors, the works. I can't afford—" "Yes, you can. Your sister stole $30,000 in bonds, but you still have the house, your pension, your savings accounts they couldn't access. You're not destitute, Diane. You're just wounded. There's a difference." After dinner, Bryce showed me something else on his phone, his Instagram account. He'd made a post the day after the accident, a photo of me in the hospital, eyes closed, bruised but alive. The caption read, "My grandmother survived a murder attempt by my own father. She's the strongest person I know. If you have an elderly family member, check on them. Make sure they're safe. Make sure people who claim to love them actually do. Family abuse awareness. Senior safety. Survivor, not victim." It had 47,000 likes, thousands of comments. "It went viral," Bryce said quietly. "People are sharing their own stories. About family members who stole from them, abused them, isolated them. You're not alone, Grandma. There are so many others." I read through the comments with tears in my eyes. Stories of elderly parents swindled by children, grandparents isolated and controlled, inheritances stolen, lives destroyed by greed disguised as love. "You started something," Margot said, reading over my shoulder. "People are talking about this. The news picked it up because of Bryce's post. You're giving other victims permission to speak up. I hadn't meant to become a symbol. I just wanted justice. But maybe this was justice too. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd suffered in silence." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Talbot, this is Madison Reeves, the bank teller. Detective Patterson gave me your number. I need to talk to you. Ruth threatened my family. I'm so sorry for what I did. Please." I showed it to Margot. She frowned. Could be a trap. Or she could be another victim. I thought about it, then typed back. "Talk to Detective Patterson first. He'll arrange a safe meeting." Her response came immediately. "Thank you. I have more information. About their plans, about Ruth's other victims. I'll tell the detective everything." Other victims. Plural. How many people had Ruth hurt? How many families had she destroyed? "Tomorrow we find out," I said, setting my phone down. "Tomorrow we hear what Madison knows, and then we make sure Ruth and Owen and Sienna never hurt anyone again." Bryce squeezed my hand. "You're not scared anymore." He was right. I wasn't. The fear that had lived in my chest for weeks, the fear of being alone, of being betrayed, of being killed, had transformed into something harder, something colder. Determination. They'd tried to kill me for money. They'd failed. Now they'd lose everything. The bail hearing happened in a courtroom that smelled like floor polish and anxiety. I sat in the front row between Margot and Bryce, my ribs still aching under the compression wrap the doctor had given me. Every breath was a reminder of what they'd done. Owen wouldn't look at me. He stared at the defense table, his shoulders hunched, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made him look pale and sick. Sienna sat beside him, rigid and furious, whispering angrily to their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who kept checking her phone. Ruth sat alone at a separate table with a public defender. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. Her gray roots were showing, her lipstick uneven. When her eyes finally met mine across the courtroom, I saw something I didn't expect. Fear. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She reviewed the case files with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too many families destroy themselves. "The state is charging all 3 defendants with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, theft, and tampering with evidence," she read aloud. "The state is requesting remand without bail, given the severity of charges and evidence of flight risk." Owen's lawyer stood immediately. "Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. He's a lifelong Iowa resident with strong community ties. He's willing to surrender his passport and submit to electronic monitoring. The state's case is based largely on circumstantial evidence and recordings obtained without proper..." The recordings were obtained by a minor in his own home, documenting crimes being planned against his grandmother. The prosecutor cut in. She was younger than Owen's lawyer, but her voice carried weight. "We have 17 separate recordings over a 2-month period showing clear premeditation. We have forensic evidence of vehicle tampering. We have video evidence of Ruth Campbell burglarizing Mrs. Talbot's safe deposit box. These defendants planned and executed an attempted murder. They're dangerous." Judge Morrison looked at Owen. "Mr. Talbot, do you wish to make a statement?" Owen's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but he stood anyway. His hands were shaking. "Your Honor, His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "I need to tell the truth." "Owen, don't," his lawyer hissed. He ignored her. His eyes found mine finally, and what I saw there made my chest tighten. Anguish. Real, raw anguish. "My Aunt Ruth started talking to me about my mother's money 2 years ago," he said, his words tumbling out fast. "After I sold my business. She said Mom was wasting her potential, that she could be living better, that we deserved some of that money for taking care of her as she got older." "Mr. Talbot, I strongly advise you to stop talking," his lawyer said sharply. "I can't." He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "I can't keep lying. Ruth said if I didn't help her, she'd hurt Bryce. She showed me pictures of him, at school, at his friend's house. She'd been following him. She said accidents happen to teenage boys all the time." The courtroom went silent. "She threatened my son," Owen continued, his voice breaking. "So I went along with it. The money requests from Mom. The lies about my business. Ruth said we'd just take what we needed and Mom would never know. But it kept escalating. Ruth wanted more. She wanted everything." Sienna was staring at him, her mouth open. "What are you doing?" she whispered furiously. "Ruth told me she'd make it look like an accident," Owen said, ignoring his wife. "She said she knew how to cut brake lines, how to make it seem natural. I didn't think she'd actually do it. I thought she was just talking, but then she called me 3 days before the crash and said it was done, that all I had to do was take Mom for a drive on Route 32. He looked at me directly now. "Mom, I drove that car knowing the brakes were cut. I wore my seatbelt knowing yours was sabotaged. I took you down that hill planning to survive while you didn't. I'm guilty. I did this. But Ruth was the one who planned everything. She said if I didn't go through with it, Bryce would have an accident too. She said she'd hurt him and make it look like suicide." "Your Honor," the prosecutor stood slowly. "The state requests a recess to discuss a potential cooperation agreement with Mr. Talbot." Judge Morrison nodded. 30-minute recess. Defendants remain in custody. They took Owen out through a side door. Sienna was screaming at her lawyer. Ruth sat motionless, her face blank. In the hallway outside, Bryce grabbed my arm. "Grandma, is he telling the truth? Did Aunt Ruth really threaten me?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we're going to find out. Detective Patterson found us near the water fountain. Mrs. Talbot, the prosecutor wants to talk to you." Owen's offering to testify against Ruth in exchange for a reduced sentence, but they need to know if you're willing to accept that. "What kind of reduced sentence?" "Attempted murder drops to attempted manslaughter. Probably 5 to 7 years instead of 25 to life." Margot made a noise of disgust. "He tried to kill you and he gets 7 years?" Ruth planned it, Patterson said quietly. Owen was the weapon, but Ruth was the hand pulling the trigger. And if Owen testifies, we can prove that Ruth has done this before. Before? I repeated. Madison Reeves, the bank teller, she's been talking. Ruth used her to access 4 other safe deposit boxes over the past 3 years. Elderly clients, all of them. We're investigating now, but it looks like Ruth has been running this scam for a while. Befriend elderly people, get access to their finances, drain them dry, and move on. You were just the biggest score because your family. The floor tilted. I grabbed Bryce's arm for support. How many people has she hurt? I asked. At least 4 we know of, maybe more. One of them, an 86-year-old woman named Helen Morrison, she died 6 months ago. Fall down the stairs. Everyone thought it was an accident. Patterson's expression was grim. We're exhuming her body. Oh my God, Margot whispered. We met with the prosecutor in a small conference room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Her name was Rebecca Chen, no relation to Officer Chen, she clarified. And she laid it out clearly. Owen gives us Ruth, full testimony, all communications, everything. In exchange, he pleads guilty to attempted manslaughter and conspiracy. 5 years minimum, eligible for parole after 3 if he cooperates fully. Sienna gets the same deal if she testifies about what she knew. And Ruth? I asked. Ruth gets attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, elder abuse, and we're adding charges related to the other victims. She's looking at life without parole if we can prove the Helen Morrison connection. What about my grandson? I looked at Rebecca directly. Owen says Ruth threatened Bryce. Is that true? Rebecca pulled out a folder. We found texts on Ruth's phone, messages to a burner number we traced to Owen, dozens of them over the past year. Here's a sample. She showed me printouts. My hands shook as I read them. Your boy is growing up so fast. Would be a shame if something happened to him. Teenage boys are so reckless. Car accidents, drownings, overdoses. Tragic, really. You know what you need to do, Owen. Unless you want to find out how well Bryce can swim. The dates went back 14 months. Long before the crash, Ruth had been threatening Bryce for over a year. Jesus Christ, I breathed. Owen was telling the truth, Rebecca said quietly. Ruth coerced him through threats against his son. That doesn't excuse what he did. He still made the choice to participate. But it's a mitigating factor. The judge will consider it at sentencing. I thought about Owen in that courtroom, crying, confessing. I thought about the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, the teenager who'd called me every Sunday from college, the man who'd held my hand at his father's funeral and promised to take care of me. That man had died somewhere along the way. Or maybe he'd just been buried under years of weakness and bad choices. But he was trying to claw his way back now, trying to save his son the only way he knew how. If I agree to this, I said slowly, Owen has to do more than just testify. He has to get help. Real help. Therapy. Treatment for whatever made him so easy for Ruth to manipulate. And he stays away from Bryce until Bryce decides he's ready to see him. Rebecca nodded. We can make those conditions of his plea deal. And Sienna is fighting the charges. Says she didn't know anything about Ruth's threats. Claims she thought Owen's plans were just talk. She's not cooperating. Then she gets the full sentence, I said firmly. She celebrated my death. I heard her. She knew exactly what was happening. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Morrison read Owen's new plea agreement into the record. He pleaded guilty, voice steady this time, and was remanded to county jail pending transfer to state prison. 5 years. He'd be 52 when he got out. Sienna's lawyer requested a separate trial. Denied. She'd be tried alongside Ruth. Though at this point they were pointing fingers at each other so viciously that their lawyers had to be separated. Ruth never spoke, never testified, just sat there with her dead eyes while the prosecutor laid out her crimes like bodies on a table. 4 elderly victims over 3 years. Theft totaling over $400,000. 1 probable murder. 1 attempted murder. The bail was denied for both Ruth and Sienna. They were led away in handcuffs, and I felt something in my chest finally release. Outside the courthouse, news cameras were waiting. Bryce's viral post had turned this into a national story. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Talbot, how does it feel to get justice? Are you angry at your son? What would you say to other elderly people being abused by family?" Margot tried to shield me, but I stopped her. I walked up to the microphones, Bryce on one side and Margot on the other, and I spoke. "My sister tried to kill me for money. My son was coerced into helping her through threats against my grandson. I'm angry, I'm heartbroken, but I'm also lucky because I survived, and because I have people who love me, really love me, not my bank account." I looked directly at the cameras. If you're an elderly person being pressured by family for money, tell someone. If your loved ones only call when they need something, that's not love. That's abuse. And if you're young and watching your parents or grandparents being manipulated, speak up. Be like my grandson. Be brave. Document everything. Save them before it's too late. The reporters erupted with more questions, but Margot guided me away. We drove back to her house in silence, all of us processing what had happened. That night, I got a call from the jail. Owen wanted to speak to me. I almost said no, but Bryce was listening, watching my face, and I knew he needed to see that forgiveness. Even conditional, painful forgiveness was possible. "Make it quick," I told the operator. Owen's voice was hoarse. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know nothing I say will ever be enough, but I need you to know. I never stopped loving you. I was just so weak, so scared, and Ruth knew exactly how to use that. You could have come to me," I said. "Told me Ruth was threatening Bryce. We could have protected him together." I know, I didn't think you'd believe me. I'd lied so many times already." He was right about that. I wouldn't have believed him. "Take care of Bryce," Owen said. "Please, be the parent I should have been." "I will," I promised. "But Owen, when you get out, if you want any kind of relationship with him, with me, you have to be different. Actually different. Not just sorry. I will be. I swear. I'll spend every day of these 5 years becoming someone worthy of you both." I didn't know if I believed him, but I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. After I hung up, Bryce hugged me carefully, mindful of my ribs. "Do you think he means it?" he whispered. "I think he wants to mean it," I said. "We'll see if he does." Ruth's trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat through every day of it, Bryce on one side, Margot on the other. The courtroom became a second home. The same hard wooden benches, the same flickering fluorescent lights, the same smell of old paper and broken families. The prosecution built their case like archaeologists uncovering bones. Layer by layer, victim by victim, they showed exactly what Ruth Campbell had done. Helen Morrison, 86 years old, befriended by Ruth at a church social. 6 months later, Helen's safe deposit box was empty, and she was dead at the bottom of her stairs. The exhumed body showed evidence of blunt force trauma inconsistent with a simple fall. Ruth had pushed her. Margaret Chen, 73. Met Ruth at a grief support group after Margaret's husband died. Ruth helped her organize her finances. $32,000 disappeared over 4 months. Margaret was still alive, testified in a wheelchair, her voice shaking as she identified Ruth. Thomas Brennan, 68, Ruth's neighbor in Iowa City. She'd borrowed his tools, brought him casseroles, earned his trust. His coin collection, worth $47,000, vanished from his garage safe. He'd thought he was getting senile, forgetting where he'd put things. The coins turned up in a pawn shop in Omaha, traced back to Ruth through fingerprints. Patricia Kowalski, 79, Ruth's former co-worker from 20 years ago. They'd reconnected on Facebook. Ruth visited often, helped with shopping, had keys to the house. Patricia's jewelry, her late husband's war medals, $17,000 in cash from a coffee can in the freezer. All gone. Patricia testified crying, saying she'd thought Ruth was her friend. 4 victims, plus me. 5 families destroyed by greed, disguised as kindness. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Judge Morrison's sentencing was 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Victims' families, reporters, advocates from elder abuse organizations who'd been following the case. Bryce's viral post had sparked a national conversation. I'd been interviewed by 3 different news magazines. Other families were coming forward with their own stories. Ruth stood to hear her sentence. She'd aged 10 years in the past months. Her hair was completely gray now, her face gaunt. She looked small in her orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. Ruth Ann Campbell, Judge Morrison read, her voice cold and clear. You have been convicted of 1 count of second-degree murder in the death of Helen Morrison, 1 count of attempted murder of Diane Talbot, 4 counts of elder abuse, 8 counts of theft, 5 counts of fraud. The court finds your actions to be predatory, calculated, and without remorse. Ruth's face remained blank. No tears, no emotion, just emptiness. For the murder of Helen Morrison, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the attempted murder of Diane Talbot, 25 years to run consecutively. For the remaining charges, an additional 30 years, also consecutive. The math was simple. Ruth would die in prison. She'd never see daylight as a free woman again. They led her away. She looked at me once as she passed. No apology, no explanation. Just a cold, evaluating stare, like she was still calculating what I was worth to her. Nothing, I thought. I'm worth nothing to you now. Sienna's trial had been separate but simultaneous. Her defense was that she'd known nothing about Ruth's threats, that she'd believed Owen was acting alone, that she was a victim of his manipulation too. The jury didn't buy it. They'd heard the recordings of her celebrating my expected death, seen her social media posts about early retirement, watched her lawyer try to paint her as an innocent wife following her husband's lead, while the evidence showed her as an active, enthusiastic participant, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of fraud, 7 years. She'd be 45 when she got out. They took her away screaming about appeals and injustice and how this was all my fault for being vindictive. The reporters loved it. After the sentencing, Margot drove us back to my house, my real house, not her guest room. I'd moved back in 3 weeks earlier, after the security system was installed. Cameras on every door, motion sensors in every room, locks that couldn't be picked or glued. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. I'm making dinner, Margot announced, heading to my kitchen like she owned it. Which, honestly, she kind of did now. She'd been staying with me and Bryce since the trial started. The guest room was hers. Her dog, an ancient golden retriever named Biscuit, had claimed the living room couch. Margot, you don't have to. I'm making dinner, she repeated firmly. Bryce, set the table. Diane, sit down and rest. You've been carrying this family on your back for long enough. Let us help. So I sat, watched Bryce pull out plates and silverware with the easy confidence of a kid who'd finally found stability. Watched Margot chop vegetables with the same precise movements she'd used to grade papers for 23 years. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca Chen, the prosecutor. The restitution hearing is scheduled for next month. Ruth's assets are being liquidated. You'll receive compensation for the stolen bonds and jewelry, probably around $35,000 after legal fees. Not enough to replace what I'd lost, but enough to matter. Another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. I almost deleted it until I saw the name at the bottom. Mrs. Talbot, this is Madison Reeves. I just wanted you to know I testified against Ruth today at her civil forfeiture hearing. They're taking her house, her car, everything. The money will go to her victims. I'm so sorry for what I did. I hope someday you can forgive me. I'm getting help now. Real help. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I stared at the message for a long moment. Madison had been a victim too, in her way. Young, broke, manipulated by Ruth's promises of easy money. She'd made terrible choices, but she'd also come forward, testified, helped build the case. I forgive you, I typed back. Keep getting help. Be better. Her response was immediate. I will. Thank you. Forgiveness was strange. It didn't erase the damage, didn't make the betrayal hurt less, but it felt like setting down a heavy bag I'd been carrying. Not for Madison's sake, For mine, dinner was spaghetti again, Margot's comfort food of choice. We ate at the kitchen table, the three of us, and talked about anything except trials and murders and betrayals. Bryce told us about his college applications. He wanted to study psychology, help people like us who'd been manipulated and hurt. "You're going to be amazing at it," I told him honestly. "You already saved my life once. You'll save a lot more." His eyes got wet. "Grandma, I was so scared. When I realized what they were planning, I didn't know what to do. I thought if I told anyone, they'd hurt you faster." "You did exactly right. You documented everything and kept yourself safe. That's all I could have asked for." After dinner, Margot pulled out a bottle of wine she'd been saving. "To surviving," she said, pouring 3 glasses, a small one for Bryce, who was technically still underage but who'd earned it. "To surviving," we echoed. The doorbell rang at 8. I almost didn't answer it. Too many reporters, too many curiosity seekers driving by to see the house where it had all happened. But when I checked the security camera feed, I recognized the visitor. Dr. Phelps, the doctor from the hospital who'd been the first to question my coma. I opened the door. He stood there holding a casserole dish, looking embarrassed. "Mrs. Talbot, I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to check on you. Make sure you are healing properly." "I'm fine," I said, but I stepped back to let him in. "Really fine, thanks to you." "If you hadn't caught that Ruth was trying to bribe you, I almost didn't catch it," he admitted. "She was subtle, offering to make a donation to my research fund if I'd sign off on some paperwork declaring you mentally incompetent." I thought it was odd, started asking questions. He handed me the casserole. Chicken pot pie, my grandmother's recipe. Seemed appropriate. We invited him to stay for coffee. He and Margot hit it off immediately. Both medical professionals, both with dry senses of humor, both clearly lonely in that way that comes from devoting your life to helping others. I watched them talk and laugh and saw something I hadn't expected. A possibility. Not for me. I was done with romance, done with trusting people that way. But for Margot, who'd been divorced for 15 years and insisted she was happy alone, maybe she didn't have to be alone. Maybe none of us did. 3 months later, I stood in front of a crowd at the Cedar Rapids Community Center. 200 people had shown up for the elder abuse awareness event that local advocates had organized around my story. I'd never been good at public speaking, spent 30 years teaching first graders, not giving speeches. But the organizer had asked, and Bryce had encouraged me, and Margot had helped me write note cards. So I stood there, under bright lights, microphone in hand, and told my story. Not all of it, not the most painful parts, but enough. Enough to let other people know they weren't alone. That family betrayal was real, common, devastating. That asking for help wasn't weakness. That surviving made you strong, not broken. "I'm 68 years old," I said to the silent crowd. "My sister tried to kill me. My son helped her because he was being threatened. My daughter-in-law celebrated it. For months, I thought I was alone. I thought I'd failed somehow, that I'd been a bad mother, a bad sister, to deserve this." I paused, looked at Bryce in the front row. He smiled at me, encouraging, but I didn't deserve it. None of us do. If someone you love only loves your money, that's not love. If they pressure you, manipulate you, threaten you, that's abuse. And you deserve better. We all deserve better. The applause was thunderous. People stood. Some were crying. After my speech, 17 people came up to tell me their own stories. 3 gave me contact information for lawyers. 5 said they were finally going to report their situations to the police. One woman, maybe 90 years old, held my hands and whispered, "Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. You gave me permission to fight back too." That night, lying in my own bed in my own house with the new locks and cameras keeping me safe, I thought about Owen. He'd been in prison for 4 months now. He wrote every week, long letters talking about therapy, about the books he was reading, about how he was learning to be honest with himself. I hadn't written back yet. Wasn't sure if I would. But I'd kept the letters, all of them. In a box in my closet next to the box of Bryce's baby pictures and my mother's recipe cards. Maybe someday I'd read them. Maybe someday I'd even respond. Maybe when he got out in a few years, we'd find a way to rebuild something. Not what we had before, that was gone, dead, buried, but something new. Something honest. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe some bridges should stay burned. The choice was mine now. That's what freedom meant. Not forgetting what happened. Not pretending it didn't hurt. But choosing how to move forward on my own terms. I still owned my house. Still had my pension and my savings. Still had Bryce, who was thriving in his senior year, already accepted to 3 universities. Still had Margot, who'd become more than a friend. She was family now, the real kind. Ruth would die in prison. Sienna would serve her time and emerge to nothing. No money, no reputation, no easy retirement. Owen would have his chance at redemption if he took it seriously. And me? I was free. Actually free. Maybe for the first time in my adult life. Free from obligation disguised as love. Free from manipulation disguised as family. Free from guilt that was never mine to carry. I'd survived the accident, survived the betrayal, survived the trial. Now I was going to do more than survive. I was going to live. On my terms. With people who loved me for me, not for what I could give them. That was the real victory. Not the convictions or the sentences or the restitution. The victory was reclaiming my own life. And that, I thought as I turned off the light, was worth more than any amount of money my sister and son could have stolen. Say, the blood tasted like copper pennies and regret. I pressed the paper napkin to my split lip and watched my daughter-in-law's face contort with rage, her hand still raised from the slap that had silenced every conversation in Margie's diner. "You forgot your wallet!" Vanessa hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Again! Because you're a useless old lady who can't remember anything." I said nothing. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. And subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. I had learned a long time ago that silence was the most powerful weapon in any arsenal. 43 years with the National Security Agency had taught me that. 37 of those years spent in rooms that didn't officially exist, analyzing threats that would never make the news. Making decisions that kept people alive without them ever knowing they had been in danger. My son Brian sat across from me, staring at his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. He didn't look up when his wife hit me. He didn't flinch. He had stopped flinching months ago. I had watched the light go out of my boy's eyes slowly, year by year, as Vanessa tightened her grip on his life. First, she isolated him from his friends, then from his colleagues. Then from me. "Well?" Vanessa demanded. "What do you have to say for yourself?" I dabbed at my lip again. The napkin came away red. I folded it carefully, precisely, the way I used to fold classified documents before feeding them into the shredder. Then I placed it in my purse. The diner was frozen around us. Margie herself stood behind the counter, coffee pot suspended in midair. 2 truckers in the corner booth had stopped mid-bite. A young mother was covering her daughter's eyes. Everyone was watching, but no one was moving. That was the thing about violence. It paralyzed witnesses as effectively as it paralyzed victims. Vanessa leaned closer, her perfume cloying and aggressive. "I asked you a question, Ruth." I looked past her, past Brian's bowed head, past the horrified faces of strangers. I looked at the small black dome in the corner of the ceiling. The security camera. It had a direct feed to the diner's recording system, which was stored on a cloud server, which was backed up automatically every 6 hours. I knew this because I had checked when we first started coming here for our monthly family lunches, the lunches that had become exercises in humiliation, where Vanessa found new ways to remind me that I was old, useless, and unwanted. I caught my own reflection in the window beside our booth, 67 years old. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun. Cardigan sweater, sensible shoes, reading glasses on a chain around my neck. The picture of a harmless grandmother. "I'm sorry about the wallet," I said quietly. "It won't happen again." Vanessa smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered prey and was savoring the moment before the kill. "It better not. Brian works too hard to support your forgetful..." She never finished the sentence. I raised my left hand to adjust my glasses, letting my sleeve fall back just enough. The watch on my wrist was unremarkable. Silver band, simple face, the kind of watch you'd expect a retired grandmother to wear. But there was a small button on the side, recessed so it couldn't be pressed accidentally. Nothing visible happened. No sound, no light, no indication that anything had changed. But somewhere across town, in a building that appeared on no maps and employed people who officially didn't exist, a red light began to blink on a monitoring station. I had 32 years of service. I had saved lives that would never be counted, stopped attacks that would never be reported, kept secrets that would never be told. When I retired, they gave me a ceremony in a windowless room, a medal I couldn't display, and a watch. For emergencies, Director Morrison had said. Real emergencies. We take care of our own, Ruth. Always. I had never pressed the button before. Not when Harold died of cancer and I sat alone in a hospital room holding his hand as the monitors went flat. Not when I discovered that my retirement account had been drained by a financial advisor who thought old ladies were easy marks. Not when Brian stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped being the son I had raised. But when Vanessa's palm connected with my face, when I tasted blood in a diner where I used to debrief agents over apple pie, when my own son looked away like I was a stranger, something shifted. Is there a problem here? A man's voice, young, nervous. I looked up to see one of the truckers standing beside our table, hands clenched at his sides. Brave. Stupid, but brave. Mind your own business, Vanessa snapped. Ma'am, I saw what you did. That's assault. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Call them. Tell them a daughter-in-law got frustrated with her senile mother-in-law. See how seriously they take it. The trucker hesitated. He wanted to help. I could see it in his eyes. But he didn't know how. Most people didn't. That was the tragedy of domestic violence. It happened in plain sight, and everyone looked away because they didn't know what to do. It's fine, I said softly. Please, I don't want any trouble. The trucker looked at me with something like pity. Then he returned to his booth, shaking his head. Vanessa laughed. See, Brian? Your mother knows her place. Don't you, Ruth? Brian still wouldn't look at me. My beautiful boy, who had been curious and kind and full of questions as a child. My son, who had called me every Sunday for 30 years, who had cried at his father's funeral, who had promised he would always take care of me. He had believed Vanessa when she told him I was difficult. He had believed her when she said I was controlling. He had believed her when she insisted that limiting contact was healthy boundaries. Now he sat in a diner booth while his wife hit his mother, and he didn't say a word. I wondered how long it had taken Vanessa to break him. I wondered what threats she had used, what manipulations, what slow erosion of his confidence and identity. I wondered if the man I had raised still existed somewhere inside this shell, or if he was gone forever. We should go, Brian said finally, his voice barely audible. I have work in the morning. Yes, Vanessa agreed, standing up. Your mother has ruined another nice meal, as usual. I reached for my purse, moving slowly, the way old ladies were expected to move. My hand brushed against the folded napkin with my blood on it. Evidence, documentation, the building blocks of a case. I followed them out of the diner, playing my part. The doddering grandmother, the unwanted burden, the useless old lady. The Virginia evening was warm and humid. The parking lot half empty. Vanessa's white BMW gleamed under the streetlights. Brian walked 3 steps behind her, head down, shoulders hunched. I felt them before I saw them. A subtle shift in the air. The distant rumble of multiple engines, approaching fast but controlled. The kind of precision driving they taught at the farm, where CIA operatives learned the art of tactical movement. Vanessa was unlocking her car when the first SUV appeared at the entrance of the parking lot. Black, government plates, tinted windows, then the second, and the third, fourth, fifth. They blocked every exit with military precision, forming a perimeter around the parking lot in less than 8 seconds. Doors opened simultaneously. Men in tactical gear emerged, weapons not drawn but visible, moving with the coordinated efficiency of a unit that had trained together for years. Vanessa spun around, her face cycling through confusion, fear, and outrage. What the hell is this? Brian, call the police. Brian didn't move. He was staring at the SUVs, at the armed men, at the impossible scene unfolding around him. The lead agent approached, Samuel Torres. I had recruited him 23 years ago, fresh out of the Marines. Trained him myself. Watched him rise through the ranks to become one of the best field operatives in the agency's history. He stopped 3 feet from me and snapped to attention. His salute was perfect, crisp, the salute of a soldier to a commanding officer. Commander Harper, we received your signal. We are ready. Vanessa's face went white. Commander, what? Brian, what is happening? Samuel turned to her, his expression professionally blank. Ma'am, you need to step away from the vehicle. Slowly. Hands where we can see them. This is insane. Brian, tell them this is your mother. She's just a retired secretary or something. I stepped forward then, slowly, deliberately, letting the mask of the harmless grandmother fall away, letting them see, for the first time, the woman I really was. Vanessa Collins Harper, I said. My voice was different now, harder, colder. The voice I had used in interrogation rooms and situation rooms and the secure chambers where careers and sometimes lives ended. That's not actually your real name, is it? We're going to have a long conversation about that. About a lot of things. You're crazy. You're a crazy old woman. But her voice was shaking now, her eyes darting between the armed men. Brian, do something. Brian was staring at me. I watched understanding dawn on his face, followed by confusion, followed by something that looked almost like wonder. Mom? He whispered. Who are you? I touched my split lip gently. The blood had dried, but the sting remained. I'm someone who should have told you the truth a long time ago, I said. And I'm someone who is very, very done being called useless. Samuel Torres gestured to 2 of his men. They moved toward Vanessa with handcuffs. You can't do this, she screamed. I have rights. I want a lawyer. You'll get one, Samuel said calmly. After we've finished processing you, the charges are extensive. I'd recommend cooperation. As they led her away, Vanessa twisted to look back at me. The hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted. I had seen that look before, from terrorists and traitors and people who had tried to hurt my country. I had never seen it from someone who sat across from me at family dinners. This isn't over, she spat. I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone what you did to me. I said nothing. I watched them put her in the back of an SUV, watched the door close, watched her face disappear behind tinted glass. Then I turned to my son. Brian was standing in the middle of the parking lot, looking lost and small, like the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The boy I had read stories to, taught to ride a bike, sent off to college with homemade cookies and a promise to call every Sunday. The man who had watched his wife hit me and said nothing. I don't understand, he said. Any of this. Mom, what's happening? Who are these people? I walked over to him slowly. My bones ached. My lip throbbed. I was 67 years old and I was tired in ways that had nothing to do with age. They're colleagues, I said, from my other career. The one I never told you about. What other career? You were a secretary at a government office. You filed papers. He stopped, staring at me like he was seeing a stranger. You lied to me? My whole life? I protected you. There's a difference. I reached out to touch his face, and he flinched. That hurt more than Vanessa's slap. Brian, I know this is overwhelming. I know you have questions, but right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Trust you? Mom, I don't even know who you are. I let my hand fall. No, I said quietly. You don't. And that's my fault. But I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix everything. Samuel Torres appeared at my elbow. Commander, we should move. The perimeter is secure, but we're attracting attention. I nodded. Take us to the safe house. My son will need a room. Not now, Brian. We'll talk later. Right now, you need to come with me, and you need to not ask questions. For a moment, I thought he might refuse. I thought he might demand answers, might insist on calling the police, might try to run to Vanessa's defense. He had been conditioned for years to defer to her, to believe her. to see her as the authority in his life. But something in his eyes shifted, something that looked almost like recognition. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, I'll come." As we walked toward one of the SUVs, I glanced back at Margie's diner. Through the window, I could see the patrons still frozen, still staring. Margie herself had come out from behind the counter, mouth open, coffee pot forgotten. I had eaten apple pie at that counter thousands of times over the years. I had debriefed agents here, planned operations here, celebrated quiet victories that would never be acknowledged. Now I had been assaulted here, and now everyone in that diner knew that Ruth Harper, the quiet old woman who always ordered the turkey club and left a generous tip, was something more than she appeared. The SUV's door closed behind me. Samuel Torres gave a signal, and we were moving. I sat in the back seat, watching Arlington slide past the tinted windows. My son sat beside me, silent and shell-shocked. Somewhere behind us, in another vehicle, Vanessa was probably screaming threats and demanding lawyers. I had spent 43 years serving my country from the shadows. I had never asked for recognition, never wanted fame, never needed anyone to know what I had done. But I was done being invisible. I was done being underestimated. I was done letting a woman like Vanessa Collins, or whatever her real name was, make my son think I was useless. She had no idea who she had married into, but she was about to find out. The safe house was in McLean, a nondescript colonial on a tree-lined street that could have belonged to any upper-middle-class family. It didn't. It belonged to an agency that officially didn't use safe houses because it officially didn't conduct domestic operations. Brian hadn't spoken since we left the diner parking lot. He sat in an armchair in the living room, staring at the wall, processing something his mind wasn't built to handle. I knew that look. I had seen it on assets who discovered they had been manipulated, on analysts who realized the intelligence they trusted had been compromised, on good people who learned that the world was darker and more complex than they had ever imagined. "Coffee?" Samuel Torres asked, appearing in the doorway. My son didn't respond. "Give him time," Samuel said quietly, handing me a mug. "It's a lot to absorb." "I know." I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic. My lip had stopped bleeding, but it was swelling now, purpling at the edges. I had refused medical attention. The injury was minor, and I needed to focus. Samuel sat across from me, tablet in hand. "We have preliminary results on Vanessa Collins Harper, or rather, the woman using that identity." He handed me the tablet. On the screen was a photograph. Vanessa's face, younger, different hairstyle, but unmistakably her. Next to it was another photograph of a different woman, similar features, similar age. The real Vanessa Collins died in a car accident in Roanoke in 2014, Samuel explained. Single car crash, vehicle fire. The body was badly burned. Identification was made through dental records and personal effects. Very. The woman currently using that identity was born Rebecca Ann Mercer in Wheeling, West Virginia. She has warrants in 3 states, West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Fraud, theft by deception, and in Pennsylvania there's an open investigation into the disappearance of a former boyfriend. I scrolled through the file. Rebecca Mercer had a pattern. She targeted men who were lonely, insecure, looking for someone to make them feel special. She married them, isolated them from family and friends, and systematically drained their assets. When she was done, she moved on, leaving financial ruin and emotional devastation in her wake. Confirmed? 4, including Brian. Suspected? At least 8. She changes identities frequently, moves to new states, adjusts her approach based on what she learns from each mark. Mark? The word hit me like a second slap. Brian wasn't a husband to this woman. He was a target, a mark, a resource to be exploited and discarded. The assets she took from her previous victims. Do we know where the money went? Working on that. She's careful. Uses shell companies, offshore accounts, cryptocurrency. But she's not as sophisticated as she thinks she is. We'll find it. I looked at the photograph of Rebecca Mercer again. 23 years old in the image, already with the calculating eyes of a predator. How many lives had she destroyed since then? How many families had she torn apart? What about the boyfriend in Pennsylvania? The one who disappeared? Samuel's expression darkened. Daniel Vance, 42 years old, divorced, owned a small construction company. He started dating Rebecca in 2018. Within a year, he had transferred his business to her name, maxed out multiple credit cards, and taken a second mortgage on his home. When he discovered she was funneling money to accounts he couldn't access, he confronted her. He told his sister he was going to report her to the police. That was in March 2019. No one has seen him since. I set the tablet down carefully. You think she killed him? I think he was an obstacle, and she removed him. Whether she did it herself or had help, we don't know yet. But the Pennsylvania investigators have always suspected foul play. They just couldn't prove it. From across the room, Brian spoke for the first time. You're saying Vanessa murdered someone? We both turned. He was still staring at the wall, but his hands were shaking. We're saying it's possible, Samuel said carefully. The investigation is ongoing. The investigation? Brian laughed, but there was no humor in it. She's been sleeping next to me for 3 years. She's been eating dinner at my table, meeting my friends, telling me she loved me. And you're telling me she might be a murderer? Don't! He finally looked at me, and the pain in his eyes was raw and terrible. Don't try to comfort me, Mom. Not when you've been lying to me my entire life. I wasn't lying. I was protecting you. From what? From knowing that my mother was some kind of spy? That she had secret agents on speed dial? That she could have a woman arrested by snapping her fingers? He stood up abruptly, pacing. All those years, all those boring stories about filing paperwork and attending government meetings. All those times I thought you were just a secretary. You must have thought I was an idiot. I never thought that, not for 1 second. Then why didn't you tell me? I set my coffee down and met his eyes. Because knowledge is dangerous, Brian. The work I did, the work Samuel and his team still do, it creates enemies, powerful enemies, people who would hurt anyone connected to us, including family members. The less you knew, the safer you were. Safe. He laughed again, bitter and broken. You know what's ironic? While you were keeping me safe from your work enemies, you handed me directly to an actual criminal. A woman who's been abusing me for years. A woman who might have killed someone. The words landed like blows, each one true. I had been so focused on protecting Brian from the dangers of my professional world that I had completely missed the danger in his personal one. You're right, I said quietly. I failed you. Brian stopped pacing. Whatever response he had expected, it wasn't that. I was so careful about certain kinds of threats that I missed others entirely. I knew something was wrong. I saw the signs. The isolation. The way you flinched when Vanessa raised her voice. The excuses you made for her behavior. But I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I told myself you were an adult who could make his own decisions. Now I know better. Now I have access to resources I should have used years ago. I picked up the tablet again. Samuel, show me the financial records. Samuel navigated to another screen. Here, we traced the accounts Brian and Vanessa hold jointly. Over the past 3 years, approximately $340,000 has been transferred from those accounts to a series of shell companies. Brian went pale. That's almost everything we had. The savings, the investments, everything from Dad's life insurance, it's gone. Samuel confirmed. Moved through multiple jurisdictions, but we can trace it, and we can potentially recover a significant portion. There's more, I said, studying the records. Look at this transaction from 6 months ago. A wire transfer to an escrow account for a property purchase in the Cayman Islands. She was planning to run, Brian said slowly. She was taking everything and planning to run. Eventually, yes, but not yet. According to this timeline, she was still in the accumulation phase. She wanted more. Samuel pulled up another document. We found a life insurance policy taken out 14 months ago. $2 million, with Brian as the primary insured and Vanessa as the sole beneficiary. The room went silent. Brian sat down heavily, all the color draining from his face. She was going to kill me. We don't know that for certain, Samuel said, but his tone suggested he believed exactly that. She was going to kill me and take the money and disappear. Brian looked at me with something that might have been gratitude, or might have been horror. If you hadn't called your people tonight, if she had gotten away, she didn't get away. That's what matters now. I stood and walked to where my son sat. I wanted to touch him, to comfort him, but I didn't know if he would welcome it. I didn't know if he could bear to be touched by anyone right now. Brian, I know this is overwhelming. I know you're processing betrayals on multiple fronts, but I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. He looked up at me, waiting. Did you know any of it? Did she tell you about her past? About the other men? About the money? No. His voice cracked. God, no. I thought she loved me. I thought the way she acted was just, I don't know. I thought I deserved it somehow. She always said I wasn't good enough, that I didn't appreciate her, that I was lucky she stayed with me. That's what abusers do. They make you feel like the abuse is your fault. But I should have known. I should have seen. Should you? You're not trained for this. You're not a spy or an investigator. You're a software engineer who trusted the woman he married. I finally reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. She targeted you, Brian. She studied you, figured out exactly what you needed to hear, and she used that against you. The failure isn't yours, it's mine, for not protecting you from her. Samuel's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked up. Preliminary interrogation results. Vanessa, Rebecca, is demanding a lawyer and refusing to answer questions. But we've confirmed her real identity through fingerprints. She's definitely Rebecca Mercer. Has she asked about Brian? Once. Asked if he was safe and if she could speak to him. Samuel's expression hardened. The phrasing suggested she wanted to make sure her investment was still intact. Brian made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I straightened up. I want to see the interview room footage, and I want the full file on Daniel Vance, the missing boyfriend. If she killed him, we're going to prove it. Mom, Brian grabbed my wrist. What happens now? To her? To me? To us? I looked at my son. Really looked at him. Seeing the damage that 3 years of psychological abuse had carved into his face. The way he hunched his shoulders, made himself smaller. The way his eyes kept darting to the door, as if expecting Vanessa to walk in at any moment. It would take years to undo what she had done to him. Therapy, support, patience, time. But at least he would have years. Daniel Vance hadn't been so lucky. What happens now, I said, is that we build a case. Not just for the assault tonight, but for everything. The fraud, the identity theft, the missing boyfriend. We tear apart her entire operation and make sure she never hurts anyone again. I sat down beside him. That's up to you. I know you're angry. I know you feel betrayed. By her and by me. You have every right to walk out of here and never speak to me again. Is that what you want? What I want is to know my son again. The real you. Not the version Vanessa created. I want to tell you about my life. My real life. And hear about yours. I want to have the relationship we should have had, without secrets or lies. I paused. But only if you want that too. Brian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, the man who came to the diner. The one who tried to help when Vanessa hit you. He called you commander. Commander of what? I looked at Samuel, who nodded slightly. Some things could be shared now. I was the director of special operations for the NSA for 12 years. Before that, I ran counterintelligence operations across 4 continents. I've briefed presidents, authorized missions, and made decisions that shaped history in ways that will never be publicly acknowledged. Brian stared at me like I had grown a second head. Your father knew, I continued. He was CIA, which is how we met. We decided together to keep you out of that world. We wanted you to have a normal life, a safe life. I smiled sadly. We succeeded too well. We made you so normal, so trusting, that you couldn't recognize a predator when she was sleeping in your bed. He was. A good man and a better agent. He loved you more than anything in the world. I touched the wedding ring I still wore. He would have been horrified by what Vanessa did to you, and he would have been proud that you're strong enough to survive it. Brian looked at his hands, processing. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay, I want to know. All of it. Who you really are, what you really did, everything. He looked up at me, and for the first time since the diner, I saw something other than confusion and pain in his eyes. I saw determination. And I want to help. I don't know yet, but she used me. She made me complicit in her schemes without me even knowing it. I want to help take her down. I studied my son's face. He wasn't trained for this kind of work. He didn't have the skills or the stomach for what might be required, but he had something else. A need for justice, for closure, for proof that he wasn't just a victim. We'll see, I said. For now, you need to rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Samuel escorted Brian to a bedroom upstairs. I stayed in the living room, surrounded by files and tablets and the accumulated evidence of Rebecca Mercer's crimes. One of those files caught my eye, a photograph of Daniel Vance, the missing boyfriend. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile. A man who had trusted the wrong woman, just like my son. I was going to find out what happened to him, and if Rebecca Mercer had killed him, I was going to make sure she paid for it. The clock on the wall read 3:47 a.m. In a few hours, the sun would rise on a new day. A day of interrogations and evidence gathering and difficult conversations. But for now, in the quiet of the safe house, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not for reconciliation, that would come slowly, if it came at all, but hope that the truth, finally exposed, might set us both free. The security footage arrived at 7 in the morning. Samuel had pulled every camera feed from Brian and Vanessa's home. The smart doorbell, the baby monitor they had never used for a baby, the motion-activated cameras in the garage. I sat in the safe house kitchen, laptop open, coffee growing cold beside me. Brian was still asleep upstairs, which was probably for the best. What I was about to watch wasn't meant for him. The first clip was from 3 months ago, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. The camera was in the living room, a small unit disguised as a picture frame. Vanessa had probably installed it to monitor Brian, not realizing that we could access the feed remotely. On the screen, Brian sat on the couch, shoulders hunched, hands clasped between his knees. Vanessa stood over him, her face contorted with rage. "You told your sister about the credit card debt? Are you fucking stupid?" She asked how we were doing. I didn't think. That's right. You didn't think. You never think. That's why I have to do everything in this marriage. That's why I have to control every aspect of our finances, our social life, our everything. Because you are incapable of functioning like an adult. I'm sorry. I'll tell her I exaggerated. I'll fix it. You'll fix it. Vanessa laughed, sharp and cruel. Like you fixed it when you told your mother we were having problems? Like you fixed it when you tried to open a savings account without telling me? She hit him. An open palm slap across the face, hard enough to snap his head to the side. Brian didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't raise his hands to defend himself. He just sat there, accepting the blow like it was something he deserved. I paused the video. My hands were trembling. For 3 years, my son had lived like this. For 3 years, he had been hit, degraded, controlled, while I sat at family dinners making polite conversation with his abuser. I had noticed the signs, the nervousness, the weight loss, the way he always deferred to Vanessa, but I had told myself it wasn't my business. I had failed him, completely and utterly. Samuel appeared in the doorway. There's more, a lot more. For the next 2 hours, I watched my son's marriage through the lens of hidden cameras. I watched Vanessa berate him for leaving dishes in the sink, for speaking to his coworkers, for calling me on Mother's Day. I watched her hit him, throw things at him, lock him out of their bedroom when he didn't perform some task to her satisfaction. And I watched the moment when Brian finally broke. It was from 6 months ago, late at night, both of them in bed. Vanessa was scrolling through her phone, ignoring Brian completely. "I think we should see someone," Brian said quietly. "A counselor. To work on our communication." Vanessa didn't look up. "You think we need help because you can't handle a strong woman. I married you because I thought you had potential. I gave up my career to support yours. And this is how you repay me? By suggesting I'm the problem? I didn't say you were the problem. I said we should work on—" She turned to him then. And even through the grainy footage, I could see the coldness in her eyes. "If you ever suggest therapy again, I will tell everyone we know that you hit me. I will file a police report. I will destroy your career, your reputation, everything you care about." Brian went white. "Vanessa, I would never—" "I know, but no one else does. It would be your word against mine. The devoted wife with bruises she gave herself, versus the man who everyone knows has anger issues. I don't have anger issues. You do now. She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had just won a game their opponent didn't know they were playing. That's what I'll tell people. That's what I'll tell your mother, your sister, your boss, that you're violent and controlling, and I'm terrified of you. I stopped the video. I couldn't watch anymore. Samuel was standing by the window, his face carefully neutral. He had seen worse in his career. We both had. But this was personal. This was my son. The Pennsylvania investigators are sending us everything they have on Daniel Vance, he said. But I think we already know what happened. She threatened him the same way she threatened Brian. And when that didn't work, she escalated. That's our theory. Vance had a sister who was pushing him to leave Rebecca. The sister was vocal, persistent, suspicious. If Vance had listened to her, Rebecca would have been exposed. So she removed him permanently. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the quiet suburban street was waking up. Joggers, dog walkers, children waiting for school buses. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that in a nondescript house on their street, a former intelligence director was unraveling a predator's crimes. There's something else, Samuel said. We've been monitoring the holding facility where Rebecca is being detained. She made a phone call this morning. To someone else, a woman named Denise Park. We traced the number to a burner phone, but we managed to get voice analysis on the conversation. He handed me a transcript. Rebecca. It's me. I'm in trouble. Denise. I heard. What do you need? Rebecca. Clean up. The husband has recordings. The mother has connections. This could unravel everything. Denise. The Pennsylvania situation? Rebecca. Everything. Chicago, Tampa, all of it. Denise. I'll make some calls. Rebecca. There's a laptop in the garage, hidden in the false bottom of the tool chest. It has files, financial records, communications, things that can't be linked to the legitimate accounts. Get it before they do. Denise. Consider it done. Rebecca. And Denise, the mother. Ruth Harper. She's not what she seems. I ran her name through my contact at the DMV after the arrest. Her address is flagged in some federal database. I don't know what it means, but be careful. I looked up from the transcript. She knows something about me. She suspects. Her DMV contact ran your license plate and got a system flag. It doesn't reveal anything specific, but it tells her you're not an ordinary retiree. And this Denise Park? Who is she? That's what's interesting. Samuel pulled up a photograph on his tablet. Denise Park was Rebecca Mercer's college roommate. They've stayed in contact over the years. We believe she's been providing logistical support for Rebecca's operations, helping with identity documents, managing offshore accounts, possibly disposing of evidence. Unknown, but she's on her way to Brian and Rebecca's house right now, looking for that laptop. I felt something shift inside me, the old instincts waking up, the operational mind that had planned dozens of missions starting to analyze angles and opportunities. Let her find it, I said. Samuel raised an eyebrow. Commander, let her go to the house, retrieve the laptop, and leave. Then follow her. She'll lead us to the rest of the network. The contacts, the offshore accounts, whoever helped Rebecca disappear Daniel Vance. And if she destroys the laptop before we can recover it. She won't destroy it. The laptop has value. Financial records, blackmail material, communication logs. Denise will keep it as insurance, or she'll try to sell it. I turned from the window. But we should have someone inside the house before she gets there, hidden, recording everything. Samuel nodded slowly. I'll send Thompson and Martinez. They can be in position within the hour. Good. And Samuel? I want a full background on Denise Park. Everything. Where she lives, where she works, who she talks to. If she's been helping Rebecca for years, she knows where the bodies are buried. Possibly literally. Yes, possibly literally. The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Brian's arrival. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, rumpled and exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. I heard voices, he said. What's happening? I glanced at Samuel, who gave a small nod. We had agreed last night that Brian would be included in the investigation to the extent possible. It was his life that had been destroyed after all. We've been reviewing evidence, I said. Security footage from your house. And we've identified someone in Rebecca's network. A woman named Denise Park. I don't know that name. You wouldn't. She operates in the background, providing support. She's on her way to your house right now to retrieve a laptop hidden in the garage. Brian's face cycled through confusion, understanding, and then anger. She's still running her operation. Even from jail, that's how these networks work. They're designed to function even if one member is compromised. I poured him a cup of coffee. But her continued activity is actually helpful. It means she's exposing more of the network, giving us more threads to follow. Right now? Nothing. Later, we may need your help to access accounts or identify communications. But for now, the best thing you can do is rest and prepare. I showed him the transcript of Rebecca's phone call. I watched his face as he read it, watched the color drain away and then return in angry patches. She was going to frame me, he said. If I ever tried to leave, she was going to tell everyone I was the abuser. And that woman, Denise, she's going to help her destroy evidence. Evidence of what? The missing boyfriend? The money she stole? What else is on that laptop? That's what we're going to find out. Brian set the transcript down carefully, precisely. Then he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Cold, focused, determined. I want her to pay, he said. Not just prison. I want her to lose everything, the way she made me lose everything. I want her to know what it feels like to have her entire life dismantled by someone she trusted. I know, revenge isn't healthy. I'll deal with that in therapy. But right now, in this moment, I want her to suffer. I understood that feeling. I had felt it many times over my career. The burning need to see justice done, to watch those who hurt others face consequences. It was a dangerous feeling, one that could lead to mistakes and compromises and moral failures. But it was also a powerful motivator, and properly channeled, it could be useful. Then help us build the case, I said. Everything you know about her, habits, preferences, things she said that didn't make sense at the time. Every detail matters. Brian nodded. Where do I start? Samuel handed him a tablet and stylus. Write down everything. Don't edit yourself. Don't worry about what seems important. Just write. As Brian settled at the kitchen table and began documenting his marriage, I stepped out onto the back porch. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying the distant sound of traffic and birdsong. My phone buzzed. A message from Thompson. In position. Park just arrived. Beginning surveillance. I thought about Rebecca Mercer, the girl from West Virginia who had reinvented herself as a predator. How many lives had she destroyed? How many men had she manipulated, used, discarded? How many families had she torn apart? And how many more would she have destroyed if I hadn't pressed that button on my watch? The question haunted me. If I had acted sooner, if I had used my resources years ago to investigate Brian's wife, none of this would have happened. Daniel Vance might still be alive. My son might have been saved years of abuse, but I hadn't acted. I had played by the rules, respected boundaries, trusted that my adult son could handle his own life. I would never make that mistake again. My phone buzzed again. Thompson. Park has retrieved the laptop. She's on the move. I typed back. Follow her. Do not intercept. Let her lead us to the others. The response came quickly. Understood, Commander. Commander. I hadn't been called that in 8 years. I had thought that part of my life was over, that Ruth Harper, the intelligence director, had retired permanently, leaving only Ruth Harper, the grandmother, behind. Some identities never fully disappear. They just wait in the shadows, ready to emerge when they're needed most. And right now, with my son's life in ruins and a predator's network still operating, Commander Harper was very much needed. I went back inside to coordinate the operation. The conference call had been running for 3 hours. On the screen in front of me, 4 faces were arranged in a grid. Assistant U.S. Attorney Margaret Chen, FBI Special Agent Williams, Pennsylvania State Police Detective Morrison, and a woman from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, whose name I had already forgotten. Commander Harper, Margaret Chen said, shuffling papers. I have to be honest with you. The evidence you've compiled is impressive, but there are significant jurisdictional complications. Rebecca Mercer has committed crimes in at least 4 states. We have fraud in Virginia, identity theft in West Virginia, suspected murder in Pennsylvania, and now assault in Virginia again. Each jurisdiction has its own prosecutors, its own priorities, its own case timelines, so coordinate them. Chen smiled thinly. It's not that simple. Pennsylvania has been investigating Daniel Vance's disappearance for 5 years. They're not going to hand their case over to federal prosecutors just because we ask nicely. Detective Morrison cleared his throat. With respect, Commander, we've been working this case long before your involvement. Daniel Vance's sister has been calling my office every month for 5 years, asking when we're going to arrest someone. I'm not going to tell her that her brother's case is being folded into a larger federal prosecution that might take another 3 years to resolve. I understood his frustration. I had felt it many times myself, the bureaucratic machinery of justice grinding slowly while victims waited and perpetrators planned their escapes. What if I told you I could give you Rebecca Mercer for murder within the week? The screen went quiet. Even the FinCEN woman looked up from her notes. How? Morrison asked. Denise Park, Rebecca's accomplice. My team has been following her since she retrieved the laptop from Brian's house. She's made several interesting stops: a storage unit in Fairfax, a safety deposit box in Baltimore, and yesterday, a cabin in the mountains of West Virginia. The cabin, Chen said slowly. You think that's where... I think that's where they disposed of Daniel Vance's body. Yes. The property records show it was purchased by a shell company 3 months before Vance disappeared. The same shell company that received $200,000 from his construction business. Morrison leaned forward. If we find remains at that cabin, then you have your murder case, and Pennsylvania can prosecute Rebecca Mercer for capital murder while the rest of us build the federal fraud and racketeering charges. The meeting continued for another hour, hammering out details and protocols. By the time we disconnected, we had a plan. Search warrants for the cabin, arrest warrants for Denise Park, and a coordinated timeline that would see Rebecca Mercer facing charges in 3 jurisdictions within 30 days. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. The safe house was quiet. Brian was in his room, still processing everything he had learned. Samuel was coordinating with the surveillance team following Denise Park. My phone buzzed. A text from a blocked number. I know who you are. I know where your son is. Back off or he dies. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet suburban street. Denise Park had made a mistake. She thought she could threaten me into backing down. She didn't understand that threats only made me more determined. Samuel appeared in the doorway. Commander? Problem? I showed him the phone. His expression hardened. We need to move Brian to a more secure location. We need to accelerate the timeline. If we move Brian, Denise will know we're spooked. She'll destroy evidence, warn Rebecca, possibly disappear entirely. We can't give her that advantage. And if she makes good on the threat? I turned from the window. Then she'll discover that threatening my family is the worst mistake she's ever made. Samuel nodded slowly. What do you need? Double the security detail on Brian. I want eyes on every approach to this house, and I want Denise Park's location confirmed within the hour. Already done. She's at a hotel in Richmond. Been there since last night. Good. She's waiting, probably trying to figure out how serious we are. I picked up my phone again. Let's show her. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 8 years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Ruth Harper. I wondered when you'd call. Director Morrison. I need a favor. You always did. What is it this time? I need the full weight of the agency on a domestic case. Financial crimes, suspected murder, ongoing criminal conspiracy. That's not really our mandate anymore, Ruth. The restructuring... I know about the restructuring. I also know that Rebecca Mercer has connections to 3 foreign nationals who have been flagged in your databases. She's been moving money through accounts in Cyprus, the Caymans, and Singapore. That makes this an international case. Silence on the other end. Then, how do you know about the foreign connections? Because I've been doing this for 43 years, and I still know how to read a financial trail. I paused. I'm not asking you to run the investigation. I'm asking you to provide resources, surveillance assets, financial analysts, maybe a tactical team if things go sideways. In return, you get credit for helping to dismantle a multi-state fraud ring with international connections. Good press, good metrics, Good for your budget request next year? Morrison laughed. You always knew how to sell a deal. Fine, I'll assign a liaison team. They'll report to you, but officially they're working a separate investigation that happens to intersect with yours. That's all I need, thank you. Ruth, be careful. You're not in the field anymore. Don't let this become personal. It became personal when she hit me in that diner. But I appreciate the concern. I hung up and turned to Samuel. We have backup. Now let's talk about the cabin. For the next 2 hours, we reviewed satellite imagery, property records, and geological surveys. The cabin was isolated. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, and the only road in was a dirt track that would be impassable in bad weather. Perfect for disposing of a body. If Vance is there, Samuel said, he's been there for 5 years. The remains will be skeletal, possibly scattered by animals. It's going to be a careful excavation. Then we do it carefully. But we do it soon, before Denise has a chance to move anything. You think she will? I think she's planning something. The threat she sent wasn't just intimidation. It was a distraction. She wants us focused on protecting Brian while she cleans up loose ends. Samuel's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression shifted. Denise Park just checked out of her hotel. She's heading north. I stood up. Then we move now. Get the Pennsylvania team on the line. Tell them we're executing the search warrant tonight, not tomorrow. Commander, the warrant isn't signed yet. Then get a judge on the phone. Wake them up if you have to. I am not letting Denise Park destroy evidence of a murder because we waited for paperwork. Samuel hesitated for only a moment. Then he nodded and reached for his phone. I walked upstairs to Brian's room. He was sitting on the bed, staring at his tablet, but he looked up when I knocked on the open door. Mom, what's happening? We're moving faster than planned. The woman who's been helping Rebecca, Denise Park, is on the move. We think she's going to try to destroy evidence. Of the boyfriend, the one who disappeared in Pennsylvania. Brian's face went pale. You think He set the tablet down carefully. What do you need me to do? Stay here. The security team will be increased. Don't leave the house. Don't answer the door. Don't communicate with anyone except Samuel or me. I mean it, Brian. These people are dangerous. Rebecca threatened to frame you for abuse. Denise has threatened to kill you. They're not going to stop until they're in custody. Then let me help. I can't just sit here while you can, and you will. I crossed to where he sat and put my hands on his shoulders. I spent 43 years protecting this country. Let me spend one night protecting my son. Brian looked at me. Really looked at me. The way he used to when he was a child asking questions I couldn't answer. But this time, something had changed. He wasn't looking at a stranger anymore. He was looking at his mother, finally seeing her clearly. Okay, he said quietly. Be careful. I left him there and went back downstairs. Samuel had the team assembled, 8 operatives, fully equipped, ready to move. The judge signed the warrant, he reported. Pennsylvania team is en route to the cabin, ETA 2 hours. Still heading north. If she maintains her current speed, she'll reach the cabin around midnight. I checked my watch. 8:47 p.m. We had time, but not much. Let's go, I said. We have a murder to solve. As we loaded into the SUVs, I thought about Daniel Vance, a man I had never met, whose only crime was trusting the wrong woman. His sister had been fighting for 5 years to find answers. Tonight, she might finally get them, and Rebecca Mercer would finally face justice for all of her crimes. The convoy pulled out of the safe house, heading toward the mountains of West Virginia. Behind us, the security team took up positions around Brian's location. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the blocked number. Last warning. Back off now. I typed a reply. No. Then I turned off the phone and focused on the road ahead. Some battles couldn't be avoided. Some enemies had to be confronted directly. I had learned that in 43 years of intelligence work, and I was about to apply that lesson to the most personal mission of my career. Denise Park thought she could threaten my family and walk away. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The cabin sat in a clearing at the end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by pines that blocked most of the moonlight. It looked abandoned, windows dark, porch sagging, weeds growing through the cracks in the foundation, but appearances were deceiving. I had learned that lesson many times. Thermal imaging shows one heat signature inside, Samuel reported. checking his tablet. Ground floor, northwest corner. Most likely. She arrived about 20 minutes ago. Her car is parked behind the structure. I studied the cabin through my binoculars. The Pennsylvania State Police team was positioned at the tree line, waiting for our signal. FBI agents covered the only road out. We had 18 operatives in total, surrounding a single woman in a decrepit cabin. It felt like overkill, but Denise Park had helped dispose of at least one body. She had threatened my son. I wasn't taking any chances. Any sign of weapons? I asked. Unknown. We haven't seen her leave the vehicle with anything, but she could have supplies cached inside. Assume she's armed. Proceed with caution. Samuel relayed the orders. I watched the operatives move into position, shadows flowing through shadows, invisible to anyone not trained to see them. My phone vibrated. A call from Detective Morrison in Pennsylvania. Commander Harper, my team is in position. We're ready to breach on your command. Hold for my signal. I want to give her a chance to surrender peacefully. With respect, ma'am, this woman may have helped murder Daniel Vance. She doesn't deserve peaceful. She deserves due process. That's what separates us from the criminals. I paused. But if she doesn't cooperate, you have my full authorization to use whatever force is necessary. I lowered the binoculars and turned to Samuel. Give me a megaphone. She's going to see us coming no matter what we do. Might as well announce ourselves properly. Samuel handed me the device reluctantly. I walked to the edge of the tree line, close enough to be seen if anyone inside was watching. Denise Park. My voice echoed across the clearing, amplified and distorted. This is Ruth Harper. The cabin is surrounded by federal agents and state police. You have 90 seconds to exit through the front door with your hands visible. If you do not comply, we will enter by force. Silence. The cabin remained dark and still. I counted the seconds in my head. 60, 70, 80. At 85, the front door opened. Denise Park stepped onto the porch, hands raised. She was younger than I expected. Mid-30s with short dark hair and a face that might have been pretty if it weren't twisted with hatred. Ruth Harper, she called out. The famous commander. Rebecca told me about you. I'm sure she did. Keep your hands where I can see them and walk toward the vehicles. Denise didn't move. You think you've won, don't you? You think arresting me and Rebecca will fix everything. But you don't understand what you're dealing with. We're not alone. There are others like us. Women who learned how to take what they deserve from men who never appreciated them. A network. An organization. You can lock us up, but you can't stop what we've started. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. How many? More than you'd believe. Across the country, across the world. Women who are tired of being victims, who decided to become predators instead. Denise smiled. Rebecca was one of the best, but she wasn't the only one. And she won't be the last. Then we'll find them too. All of them. Maybe, maybe not. Denise's hands were still raised, but her posture had changed. Less surrender, more defiance. But you should know something before you take me in. Something about your precious son. I forced my voice to remain steady. What about him? Rebecca was planning to kill him. Next month. She had the whole thing arranged. A tragic accident. A grieving widow. A $2 million payout. But that wasn't the interesting part. What was the interesting part? Denise's smile widened. The interesting part is that Brian knew. Deep down, in the part of his mind he tried to ignore, he knew what she was. He knew what she was planning. And he stayed anyway, because he thought he deserved it. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't let it show on my face. 43 years of intelligence work had taught me to compartmentalize, to process information later, to never let an adversary see weakness. Denise Park, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and accessory after the fact. You have the right to remain silent. I'm not finished. Denise took a step forward. You want to know where Daniel Vance is? He's under the cabin, right under our feet. Rebecca buried him there herself, and I watched. He begged, you know. Begged her to let him go, said he'd never tell anyone. But Rebecca doesn't leave loose ends. Detective Morrison's voice crackled in my earpiece. Commander, We need to get excavation teams out here now. I know. Just give me a minute. I walked across the clearing toward Denise, stopping 10 feet away. Close enough to see her eyes, to read her expression. Why are you telling me this? I asked. What do you gain? Nothing. Everything. Denise shrugged. I'm going to prison regardless. Rebecca is going to prison. The network will continue without us. But I wanted you to know that you haven't won anything. You've just scratched the surface of something much bigger than one abusive wife and one missing boyfriend. Then help us scratch deeper. Give us names, locations, methods. Why would I do that? Because it's the right thing to do. Because those women are hurting innocent people. Because somewhere inside you, there's still a conscience that knows the difference between justice and cruelty. Denise laughed. You really believe that, don't you? That people can change, that there's good in everyone. She shook her head. Rebecca was right about you. You're soft. All that intelligence experience, all those years in the shadows, and you still believe in redemption. I believe in accountability. I believe that people who hurt others should face consequences. And I believe that even the worst people can choose to make things right. Then you're a fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool with a warrant and 18 armed operatives. I stepped back and gestured to the waiting agents. Take her into custody. Carefully. 2 FBI agents moved forward, cuffing Denise's hands behind her back. She didn't resist, but she kept her eyes on me the entire time. This isn't over, Commander, she said as they led her away. Rebecca has friends. Important friends. People who won't appreciate you interfering with their investments. Let them come. I've faced worse. Once Denise was secured in a vehicle, I turned my attention to the cabin. Detective Morrison and his team were already setting up equipment for the excavation. How long? I asked. Hard to say. If she's telling the truth about the burial location, we could find remains within hours. If she's lying, it could take days. She's not lying. She wanted us to find him. It's her final act of defiance, making sure we see what they did. Morrison nodded grimly. I've called Daniel Vance's sister. She's driving up from Pittsburgh. Should be here by morning. Good. She deserves to be here when we find him. I stepped away from the cabin and walked to the edge of the clearing. The mountains stretched out before me, dark shapes against a darker sky. Somewhere out there, other women like Rebecca and Denise were planning their next schemes, targeting their next victims. A network, an organization. I had thought this was about saving my son from one predatory woman. Now I realized it was much bigger than that. My phone buzzed. A text from Brian. Mom, are you okay? Saw the news. They're saying FBI raid in West Virginia. I typed back, I'm fine. We'll explain everything when I get back. Try to sleep. His reply came quickly. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about what Rebecca, said in those videos, about how I deserved it. Did I deserve it, Mom? My heart clenched. I stepped further away from the activity around the cabin and called him. Mom? His voice was thick, like he'd been crying. I keep watching those recordings, the things she said to me, the things she made me believe, and I can't figure out, was any of it real? Did she ever actually care about me? No, I said, more gently than the word deserved. She didn't. She targeted you, manipulated you, used you. Nothing about your relationship was real. Then why do I still miss her? Why do I feel like part of me wants her back, even knowing what she is? Because that's what abusers do. They create dependency. They make you believe you can't survive without them. I paused. It's not weakness, Brian. It's trauma, and it will take time to heal. Will it? Heal, I mean? Yes, I promise. But you have to let yourself grieve first. Grieve the relationship you thought you had, the future you thought you were building. Let yourself be angry and sad and confused. And then, slowly, let yourself move forward. Silence on the other end. Then, Mom, I'm glad you pressed that button. On your watch. I'm glad you called your people, and I'm glad you're my mother. Even if I didn't know who you really were. I'm glad you're you. I closed my eyes against the sudden sting of tears. Thank you, Brian. That means more than you know. Come home safe, okay? We have a lot of talking to do. I will. I promise. I hung up and stood in the darkness, letting the mountain air cool my face. Behind me, I could hear the excavation beginning. The careful removal of floorboards, the scrape of shovels, the methodical work of uncovering a grave. Daniel Vance had been dead for 5 years. His sister had never stopped looking for him. Rebecca Mercer had killed him and moved on to her next victim, my son. And somewhere out there, a network of women like Rebecca was still operating, still targeting vulnerable men, still destroying lives. I had one case to finish here, but when it was done, I would have work to do. The first shovelful of dirt came up from beneath the cabin. The search for Daniel Vance's remains had begun, and my search for the network that created Rebecca Mercer was just starting. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courtroom and watched Rebecca Mercer receive her sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Daniel Vance. 40 years for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Additional sentences pending in 3 other states. She would die behind bars. It was more mercy than she had shown her victims. Rebecca's face was blank as the judge read the verdict. She didn't look at me. Didn't look at Brian. Didn't look at the Vance family seated in the gallery. She stared straight ahead, as if she had already retreated to some place inside herself where none of this mattered. I wondered if she felt anything at all. Denise Park had received a similar sentence 2 months earlier. She had refused to cooperate, refused to name other members of the network, refused to show any remorse for her role in Daniel Vance's death. In her final statement to the court, she had promised that others would continue the work. We were still searching for them. After the sentencing, I stepped out of the courthouse into the spring sunshine. Brian was waiting on the steps, looking healthier than he had in years. Therapy had helped. Distance from Rebecca had helped more. "It's over," he said. "This part is. The network is still out there. I know, but for us, for our family, it's over." I looked at my son, seeing the man he was becoming instead of the shell Rebecca had created. He had started a new job, made new friends, begun to rebuild the life she had systematically destroyed. He still had nightmares sometimes. He still flinched at unexpected touches, but he was healing. "I'm proud of you," I said, "for surviving, for testifying, for everything. I couldn't have done it without you." He paused. "I keep thinking about what Denise said, that I knew what Rebecca was deep down, that I stayed because I thought I deserved it. That wasn't your fault. She manipulated you. I know, but I also know that I didn't want to see the truth. It was easier to believe I was the problem than to accept that the person I loved was a monster." He shook his head. "I won't make that mistake again. You won't. Because now you know what to look for." We walked to the car together, passing reporters and photographers who had been covering the trial. They called out questions about the network, about my career, about whether more arrests were coming, but I didn't answer. Some things weren't for public consumption. In the car, I checked my phone. A message from Samuel. Lead on possible network member in Texas. Sending file. 6 months of investigation had yielded 8 additional arrests across 5 states. Women who had operated like Rebecca, targeting vulnerable men, draining their assets, sometimes worse. Each arrest led to more names, more connections, more threads to follow. The network was bigger than we had imagined, not a formal organization with hierarchy and rules, but a loose affiliation of predators who shared techniques and sometimes victims. They had operated in the shadows for years, protected by the simple fact that no one wanted to believe women could be abusers. We were changing that narrative, one arrest at a time. "Mom?" Brian was watching me. "You're not going to stop, are you? Even now that Rebecca is sentenced. There are more victims out there. More families being destroyed. I can't ignore that. I didn't think you could." He smiled, a real smile, the first I had seen in months. "Just promise me you'll take breaks sometimes. Visit your grandson. Remember that you're allowed to be retired." I dropped Brian at his apartment and drove to the safe house. It had become my unofficial headquarters over the past 6 months, a place where I could coordinate with Samuel and the team without attracting attention. The living room was covered in files and photographs, a wall dedicated to mapping the network's connections. 12 confirmed members so far, with another 15 under investigation. Most were women in their 30s and 40s, educated, attractive, skilled at manipulation. They had targeted men across the socioeconomic spectrum, from construction workers to hedge fund managers. Samuel was waiting with coffee and updates. "The Texas lead looks solid," he said. Sandra Chen, 42, currently married to her third husband in Austin. Previous two husbands both died under suspicious circumstances, one in a car accident, one from an apparent suicide. Life insurance payouts? $1.5 million combined, and there's more. Her maiden name was Sandra Park. I looked up sharply. Park? As in, Denise Park's cousin. They grew up together in West Virginia. The connections kept spreading, like roots from a poisoned tree. Every time we thought we had mapped the network, we found new branches. What's our approach? Local FBI is prepared to take point, but they want your guidance. Sandra Chen is careful. No digital footprint, no obvious financial irregularities. If we're going to build a case, we need someone close to her. Her current husband, Michael Chen, is starting to have doubts. His sister contacted local authorities 3 months ago, concerned about changes in his behavior. Classic isolation patterns. He's cut off from friends and family, given Sandra control of their finances, become withdrawn and anxious. I thought about Brian, about the years I had watched him fade without understanding why, about all the warning signs I had ignored because I didn't want to believe my son's wife could be hurting him. We need to reach Michael Chen, directly, before Sandra escalates. That's risky. If she realizes we're investigating, then we lose the element of surprise. I know, but we also might save a man's life. I set down my coffee. Send me the file. Everything we have on Sandra Chen and her husband. I want to know their routines, their relationships, their pressure points. Samuel nodded and handed me a tablet. I began reading, losing myself in the familiar work of analysis and planning. 3 hours later, I had a strategy. 2 days later, I was on a plane to Texas. Michael Chen worked at a software company downtown. I arranged to accidentally encounter him at a coffee shop near his office. The kind of casual meeting that could be a coincidence or could be something more. He was thin, nervous, with dark circles under his eyes. He reminded me so much of Brian that it hurt. "Excuse me," I said, approaching his table. "Do you know if there's a pharmacy nearby? My phone died and I'm trying to find my prescription." He looked up, startled by the interruption. There's a Walgreens 2 blocks north, on Congress Avenue. Thank you so much." I paused, as if noticing something. "I'm sorry, are you all right? You look like you haven't slept in days." It was forward, presumptuous, the kind of comment a stranger shouldn't make. But Michael Chen was starving for someone to notice, someone to ask, someone to see what his wife had convinced him no one could see. "I'm fine," he said automatically. Then, quieter. "Actually, no, I'm not fine. I haven't been fine in a long time." I sat down across from him. "My name is Ruth. Would you like to talk about it?" He talked for 2 hours. About Sandra, about the control, about the threats and manipulations, about how he had tried to leave once and she had threatened to destroy him, to tell everyone he was abusive, to take everything in the divorce, to make sure he never saw his family again. He talked about the life insurance policy she had taken out, about the accident she kept mentioning, the one that would solve all their problems if he would just trust her. By the end of our conversation, Michael Chen had agreed to wear a wire. 3 weeks later, we had Sandra Chen on tape discussing how she planned to murder her husband and make it look like suicide. She had done it before, she explained. It was easy if you were patient, if you documented the victim's depression beforehand, if you made sure everyone knew how worried you were about them. She was arrested that night. Another member of the network, another predator exposed. But we weren't done. There were more names on our list, more women to find, more victims to save. I flew back to Virginia and drove straight to Brian's apartment. He was cooking dinner when I arrived. Actually cooking, not just surviving on takeout like he had for years with Rebecca. "Texas went well?" he asked. "Yes, another arrest. Another husband saved. Good. He handed me a glass of wine. I've been thinking about what you're doing, about the network. I want to help. Not in the field. I know I'm not trained for that, but you need people who understand what the victims are going through, who can talk to them, help them see what's happening. I can do that. I studied my son's face. He was serious, determined. The same determination I had seen in young operatives who had survived something terrible and wanted to make sure no one else went through it. It would be dangerous, I said. These women don't hesitate to hurt people who threaten them. I know. I lived with one for 3 years. He met my eyes. I'm not asking for permission, Mom. I'm telling you I'm going to help one way or another. I'd rather do it with your support. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I thought about Harold, who had always worried about the risks of our work. I thought about the years I had spent protecting Brian from my real life, only to watch him walk into a different kind of danger entirely. I thought about the network, still operating, still hurting people, still growing in the shadows. Okay, I said finally. We'll start with training. Communication protocols, safety procedures, how to recognize manipulation tactics. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. I raised my glass. To justice. To family, Brian corrected, and to never underestimating old ladies with intelligence backgrounds. We clinked glasses and drank. Outside, the sun was setting over Virginia, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, other families were suffering the way we had suffered. Other sons and daughters were being destroyed by predators who looked like loving partners. We couldn't save everyone, but we could save some. And that was enough. That was more than enough. I thought about Rebecca Mercer, spending her first night in federal prison. I thought about Denise Park, who would never hurt anyone again. I thought about Daniel Vance, finally at rest, his killer brought to justice. And I thought about my son, standing beside me, ready to fight. The mission wasn't over. It might never be over. But for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't fighting alone.